Hello and good evening. Thank you for joining for tonight's dark and scary cryptid horror stories. Let us know in the comments where you are listening from and if there is a cryptid you would like me to make a story on. Now for tonight's stories, I hope you enjoy. The Glaciers Maw. The severed hand arrived at the Kathmandu laboratory in a cooler packed with dry ice. Its fingers still curled around a clump of matted hair that analysis would later identify as belonging to no known species of primate. The hand itself was human, or had been. Lakpa Dorj recognized the calluses of a high-altitude climber, the thickened nails of someone who had spent decades in cold conditions, the distinctive tan lines that marked a veteran of the Himalayan expeditions. It was Tenzing's hand, he knew immediately. Tenzing Norbu, the Sherpa guide who had disappeared 3 weeks ago in the Khumbu region, who had been presumed dead after his team had returned without him, who had left behind a wife and 3 children, and a mystery that no one wanted to investigate. The monks who had delivered the hand refused to touch it. They had placed the cooler on the laboratory steps and retreated to the courtyard of the monastery, where they stood in silent meditation, their faces turned toward the mountains that loomed over the city like judgment. They would not enter the building, would not speak to the scientists, would not explain how they had come to possess the remains of a man who had been lost in a region that was sacred to their faith. Lakpa approached them anyway, because he had spent 30 years in these mountains, and he knew that silence often concealed more than speech. The head monk, a young man named Karma who had studied with the Dalai Lama before returning to his ancestral monastery, looked up as Lakpa approached, and his eyes held knowledge that made Lakpa's chest tighten with foreboding. "You should not have brought this here," Karma said, his voice barely audible over the wind that swept through the courtyard. "The Yeti are not beasts to be dissected. They are older than the ice. They remember when men were prey." "The Yeti," Lakpa repeated, using the Tibetan name that the Western world had corrupted into Yeti. "You think a Yeti did this?" "I know it," Karma said. "The hand was found at our monastery, frozen to a prayer wheel that hasn't turned in 200 years. The Yeti placed it there. They were sending a message." "What message?" Karma's eyes were ancient in his young face. "Stay away," he said. "The message is stay away." Lakpa should have listened. He had learned enough in his 60 years to recognize when knowledge was being offered in the spirit of warning rather than superstition. But he was a scientist, a rationalist, a man who had spent his career debunking the myths and legends that clouded understanding of the Himalayan ecology. He had written papers proving that the Yeti was a bear, a langur, a hoax, a mass hallucination brought on by altitude and isolation. He had no room in his worldview for the possibility that something existed which could not be categorized, classified, explained. He took the hand into his laboratory. He thought it carefully, documented its condition, prepared samples for DNA analysis. He worked through the night alone because his graduate students had all gone home, and his colleagues had learned not to ask about his late hours. The laboratory was quiet, the only sound the hum of equipment and the wind that rattled the windows in their frames. At 3 a.m. he heard the singing. It was faint, distant, carried on the wind that blew from the mountains. But it was unmistakably voices, multiple voices, raised in harmony that suggested coordination, intelligence, purpose. The words were in no language Lakpa recognized, but the melody was haunting, ancient, a song that seemed to predate human music entirely. He went to the window, drawn by the sound, and looked out at the mountains. The moon was full, illuminating the snow-capped peaks with a light that seemed to come from within the ice rather than reflecting the sun. And there, on the slope of the nearest mountain, he saw movement. Something large. Something that walked on 2 legs, something that was watching his laboratory with eyes that reflected the moonlight like a cat's. Lakpa stepped back from the window, his heart hammering against his ribs. He told himself it was a bear, a langur, a trick of the light and his own exhausted mind. He told himself that the altitude was affecting his judgment, that the isolation was playing tricks on his perception. He told himself these things, but he didn't believe them. He returned to his work, but his hands were shaking, and he accidentally contaminated 2 samples, and he finally gave up and went home as the sun was rising over the mountains. He didn't look at the slope again, didn't search for the figure he had seen, didn't acknowledge the possibility that karma might have been telling the truth. 3 days later, he received a phone call that would change everything. The caller was a man named Richard Whitmore, an American who spoke with the exaggerated enthusiasm of someone who had made his fortune in technology and was now looking for new frontiers to conquer. He identified himself as the producer of a podcast called Cryptid Chronicles, which investigated sightings of unknown animals with a combination of skepticism and entertainment that had attracted millions of listeners. "Dr. Dorge," Whitmore said, his voice booming through the phone speaker, "I'm putting together an expedition to the Khumbu Glacier. We've got new footage, the best quality yet. I want you to lead the team." "I'm not interested in Yeti hunting," Lakpa said. "I've spent my career proving they don't exist." "Exactly," Whitmore said. "That's why I want you. If anyone can debunk this footage, it's you. And if it turns out to be real, well, imagine the scientific implications. Discovery of a new hominid species. Proof that human evolution had multiple branches. The Nobel Prize, Dr. Dorge. I'm offering you the chance to win the Nobel Prize." Lakpa should have hung up. He should have told Whitmore to find another scientist, someone younger, someone more ambitious, someone who hadn't spent 30 years learning to be careful. But he thought of the hand in his laboratory freezer, the fingers curled around hair that belonged to no known species. He thought of Tenzing, who had been his friend, who had guided him through passes that should have killed them both, who had trusted him to know the mountains as well as any Sherpa. "What's the footage?" he asked. "Grainy," Whitmore admitted, "but unmistakable, a hulking figure bipedal dragging something limp across the ice. The scale suggests it's over 8 feet tall. The movement pattern is wrong, not bear, not human, something else." "Could be a hoax," Lakpa said. "Could be," Whitmore agreed. "That's why I need you to tell me for sure." Lakpa thought of the singing he had heard, the figure on the slope, the warning in Karma's eyes. "When do we leave?" he asked. 2 weeks, Whitmore said. "I'll send you the details. And Dr. Dorge, this is going to be huge. Whatever we find, it's going to change everything." The expedition assembled in Lukla, the gateway to the Everest region, where the airport's notorious short runway had earned it the nickname, the world's most dangerous airport. Lakpa arrived first, 2 days early, because he wanted time to reacquaint himself with the mountains before the others arrived, to feel the altitude in his lungs, to remember why he had spent his life studying these peaks that could kill as easily as they could inspire. He stayed in a tea house run by a woman named Dawa, whose family had served climbers for 3 generations. She was skeptical of his mission, he could tell, but she was too polite to say so directly. Instead, she left newspapers on his table with articles circled about previous Yeti expeditions, about the bodies that had never been found, about the climbers who had gone mad in the high passes and returned with stories that no one believed. "The Yeti are not for finding," she said on his second night as she brought him his dinner of dal bat. "They are for avoiding." "I'm not looking for them," Lakpa said. "I'm looking for proof that they don't exist." Dawa smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. "That is the same thing, Dr. Dorge, and it is just as dangerous." The rest of the team arrived on schedule. Richard Whitmore was exactly what Lakpa had expected, 50-ish, fit from gym memberships and personal trainers, dressed in expensive outdoor gear that had never been tested in real conditions. He talked constantly about the podcast, about the expedition, about the game-changing nature of what they were about to discover. He treated the Himalayas like a backdrop, a setting for his own narrative of adventure and discovery. With him came the others. Whitmore had assembled a team designed for drama rather than science, and Lakpa felt his misgivings grow as he met each of them. First was Fiona Crawford, a British journalist who wrote for a tabloid newspaper and carried herself with the world-weary cynicism of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She was here to document the expedition, Whitmore explained, to write the definitive account of their discovery. She shook Lakpa's hand with a grip that suggested she could take care of herself, and her eyes assessed him with an intelligence that made him uncomfortable. "You're the skeptic," she said, not asking. "The one who's going to tell us we're all idiots for believing in monsters." "I'm the scientist," Lakpa corrected. "I'll tell you what the evidence supports." "Same thing," Fiona said, and smiled without warmth. Next was Mark Chen, a YouTuber who went by the handle Alpine Adventures, and had built a following of 2 million subscribers by filming himself in extreme locations. He was young, mid-20s, with the manic energy of someone who had never learned to be afraid. He carried enough camera equipment to film a feature movie, and he was already talking about going live from the glacier, about breaking the internet with footage of the Yeti. "Dude, this is going to be epic," Mark said, pumping Lakpa's hand with enthusiasm that felt forced. "Millions of people are going to see this. We're making history." "We're conducting research," Lakpa said. "History is what happens after we're done." Mark's smile flickered and Lakpa saw something beneath it, desperation maybe or fear dressed up as bravado. "Right, sure, research, but if we actually find something. I mean, that's the dream, right? To be the ones who found it." "The dream is to understand," Lakpa said, "not just to find." The final member of the team was Viktor Sokolov, a Russian former Special Forces operative who had been hired as security. He was massive, 6'4" with shoulders that strained his jacket, and he moved with the economy of motion that suggested real training, real experience. His eyes swept the room constantly, assessing exits and angles, and he carried himself with the relaxed alertness of someone who expected danger. "Dr. Dorge," he said, his English accented but fluent, "I have read your work, impressive, but perhaps too confident. The mountains have many secrets." "The mountains have geology and ecology," Lakpa said. "Secrets are what we call things we haven't studied yet." Viktor smiled, showing teeth that were too even to be natural. "We will see." The team spent 2 days in Lukla, acclimatizing to the altitude, purchasing supplies, hiring porters. Lakpa watched them with growing unease. Whitmore treated the entire enterprise like a television production, more concerned with the narrative than the science. Fiona asked questions that were too sharp, too pointed, as if she were looking for something specific, some angle that would serve a story she had already written in her head. Mark filmed everything, turning even the most mundane moments into content for his audience, and Viktor watched them all with the patience of a predator, saying little, revealing less. On the 3rd day, they began their trek toward the Khumbu Glacier. The trail was well established, used by thousands of trekkers and climbers every year, but Lakpa could feel the difference this time. The mountains felt watchful, attentive, as if they were being observed by intelligences that had nothing to do with the human world. He told himself it was paranoia, the legacy of Tenzing's hand and Karma's warning, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them, something that had been waiting for a very long time. They reached Namche Bazaar on the 5th day, the Sherpa capital of the region, a town built into the side of a mountain that had grown wealthy serving the Everest industry. Here they restocked, sent messages to the outside world, and received the first disturbing report. A group of trekkers had passed through 2 days earlier, descending from the Gakyo region with a story that sounded like altitude sickness and mass hallucination. They claimed to have heard singing in the night, voices raised in harmony that came from everywhere and nowhere. They claimed to have seen figures on the ridges, silhouettes that walked on 2 legs but were too large to be human. They claimed to have found tracks, massive footprints, 18 inches long, with an opposable toe that suggested primate ancestry but proportions that suggested something else entirely. The trekkers had fled, abandoning their itinerary, descending as fast as safety allowed. Their guide, a veteran Sherpa named Angrita, had refused to speak of what he had seen, had locked himself in his room at the tea house and wouldn't come out even for meals. Lakpa went to see him. He found Angrita sitting by the window, wrapped in blankets despite the warmth of the room, staring at the mountains with eyes that had seen something that had broken him. Angrita, Lakpa said, using the familiar form of address. It's me, Lakpa Dorj, tell me what you saw. Angrita turned slowly, and Lakpa saw that his face had aged 20 years in 2 days. I saw the Yeti, he said, his voice barely audible. I saw them hunting. I saw them take the German. What German? The trekker, young man, strong. They took him in the night. We heard him screaming, but we couldn't find him. In the morning we found his leg, just his leg, frozen to a prayer wheel. Lakpa felt his stomach twist. Which prayer wheel? The old one, near the monastery, the one that hasn't turned in 200 years. It was the same monastery where Tenzing's hand had been found. The same message, the same warning. The Yeti were leaving tokens, marking their territory, telling the humans to stay away. Why didn't you report this? Lakpa asked. Why didn't you call for help? Angrita laughed, the sound brittle and broken. Help from who? The police? The army? They can't fight the Yeti. No one can fight the Yeti. They are older than the mountains. They are patient. They remember when men were prey. They remember, Lakpa repeated, hearing Karma's words echoed. They are teaching us again, Angrita said, teaching us what it means to be hunted. The German was not the first. He will not be the last. They are waking up, Dr. Dorj. Something has woken them, and now they are hungry. Lakpa returned to his team with the information, but he didn't tell them everything. He told them about the missing trekker, the strange tracks, the need for caution. He didn't tell them about the prayer wheel, about the singing, about the way Angrita's eyes had looked when he spoke of the Yeti waking up. They continued their trek the next morning, climbing higher into the mountains, toward the Khumbu Glacier where Whitmore's footage had been taken. The trail grew steeper, the air thinner, the landscape more stark and beautiful and threatening. They passed through valleys where the only sound was the wind and the crunch of their boots on stone, where the sky seemed close enough to touch, and the mountains loomed like the walls of a prison. On the 7th night, they made camp in a small valley above the tree line, surrounded by peaks that had never been named. The porters had set up tents, started a fire, prepared dinner with the efficiency of men who had done this 1,000 times. But Lakpa noticed that they were nervous, casting glances at the ridges, speaking in whispers that stopped whenever a member of the expedition approached. They're afraid, Fiona said, appearing at Lakpa's elbow. She had abandoned her journalist persona for the moment, speaking with genuine curiosity. What do they know that we don't? They know these mountains better than we do, Lakpa said. They've heard stories that we dismiss as superstition. And you, Fiona asked, what do you believe? Lakpa looked at the peaks that surrounded them, at the snow that glowed in the moonlight, at the shadows that seemed to move with purposes of their own. I believe that there are things in this world that science hasn't explained yet, he said. I believe that the mountains are older than our understanding of them, and I believe that we should be careful about what we disturb. Careful? Fiona laughed. We're on a Yeti expedition. Careful went out the window the moment we left Kathmandu. Then perhaps we should be more careful, Lakpa said. The singing started at midnight. It was faint at first, distant, coming from the east, from the direction of the glacier. But it grew louder as the minutes passed, multiple voices raised in harmony that was beautiful and terrible at once. The words were in no language Lakpa recognized, but the melody was hypnotic, drawing his attention toward the darkness beyond the camp. Do you hear that? Mark asked, emerging from his tent with his camera already recording. Is that them? It's the wind, Whitmore said, but his voice was uncertain. Wind through the passes creates strange acoustics. That's not wind, Victor said. He was standing at the edge of the camp, staring into the darkness, his hand resting on the pistol he wore at his hip. Those are voices, coordinated, intelligent. What are they saying? Fiona asked. They're not saying anything, Lakpa said. They're singing it's a hunting song. He didn't know how he knew that. The knowledge had come from somewhere deep in his memory, from stories his grandmother had told him when he was a child, about the Yeti and their ways. They sang before they hunted, she had said. They sang to coordinate their pack, to confuse their prey, to celebrate the kill that was coming. How do you know it's a hunting song? Whitmore asked. Because they're hunting us, Lakpa said. The attack came an hour later, not from the direction of the singing but from the west, from the ridge above their camp. The first warning was a scream. One of the porters, a young man named Pemba who had been gathering water from a meltwater stream. The scream was cut short, replaced by a sound like tearing fabric, and then silence. Victor was moving before anyone else, running toward the sound with his pistol drawn. Lakpa followed, despite his age and the altitude, driven by a responsibility that transcended fear. Fiona came too, and Mark, his camera still recording, capturing everything in night vision that turned the world green and ghostly. They found the stream, and they found Pemba. He was dead, that much was clear immediately, but the manner of his death was like nothing Lakpa had ever seen. The body was opened, not with claws, not with teeth, but with something else, something that had torn through flesh and muscle and bone with brute force, leaving wounds that suggested hands rather than weapons, fingers rather than knives. The ribcage was splayed open, the heart and lungs removed, and the face. The face was gone, torn away, leaving only raw red meat and the white of bone. "Oh God," Fiona whispered and turned away to vomit. Mark was still filming, his hands shaking, his breathing ragged. This is insane," he said. "What could do this? What animal could do this?" "Not an animal," Victor said. He was scanning the ridge above them, his pistol tracking shadows that moved with impossible speed. This was done with intelligence, with purpose. "We need to get back to camp," Lakpa said. "Now we need to leave this place." "Leave?" Whitmore had arrived, his face pale in the moonlight. "We can't leave. This is evidence. This is what we came to find." "This is death," Lakpa said. "This is what happens when you disturb things that should be left alone. We need to go, now." But it was too late. The singing had stopped, and in its place was silence, the heavy, expectant silence of a predator that has its prey cornered. Lakpa looked up at the ridge and saw them, silhouetted against the stars, shapes that walked on two legs but were too large, too broad, too wrong to be human. There were 3 of them, maybe 4. It was hard to tell in the darkness, hard to separate their forms from the rocks and shadows. But they were watching, he could feel their attention like a physical weight, and they were waiting for something. "Don't move," Victor whispered. "Don't run, predators chase moving prey." "They're not predators," Lakpa said. They're something else." "Then what do we do?" Fiona asked, her voice shaking. "We wait," Lakpa said. "We wait for them to decide what they want." They waited. Minutes passed, or hours. Time had lost its meaning in the presence of the creatures on the ridge. The Yeti, if that was what they were, didn't move, didn't descend, didn't attack. They simply watched, and the weight of their attention grew until it felt like a physical force, pressing down on Lakpa's chest, making it hard to breathe. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone. One moment they were there, watching. The next, the ridge was empty, the silence broken only by the wind. They had vanished as if they had never existed, leaving behind only the dead porter and the terror that would follow the survivors for the rest of their lives. Lakpa approached Pemba's body with the caution of a man who has learned that death can be contagious. The wounds were terrible, worse up close than they had appeared from a distance. Whatever had killed him had done so with strength that defied biology, with hands that could tear through bone as if it were paper. But it was the footprints that made Lakpa's blood run cold. Surrounding the body, preserved in the soft earth near the stream, were tracks that were unmistakably primate, bipedal, five-toed, with an opposable hallux that suggested arboreal ancestry. But the proportions were wrong. The feet were too large, too broad, the toes too long, and the stride length suggested a height of at least 8 feet, perhaps more. "My God," Whitmore said, finally seeing the tracks. "They're real, they're actually real." "We need to document this," Mark said, his camera still rolling. This is everything, this is proof." "This is a death scene," Lakpa said. "This is a crime scene. We need to report this, get authorities up here, give Pemba's family the chance to mourn." "Of course," Whitmore said, "of course. But first we document, we record, we make sure that this isn't lost." They photographed the body, the tracks, the surrounding area. They collected samples, hair from the dead man's clothing that didn't match any known species, saliva from the wounds that would later prove to have DNA sequences that were similar to human but not human, not quite. They did everything that science demanded, even as their hands shook and their stomachs turned. When they were done, they returned to camp to find that the other porters had fled. Gone in the night, taking their supplies and their knowledge of the terrain, leaving the expedition stranded in a valley that had become a graveyard. "We need to descend," Lakpa said, "today, now, while we still can." "We can't leave," Whitmore said. "We're so close. The glacier is just 2 days' climb. The footage was taken there, we have to see it for ourselves." "A man is dead," Lakpa said. "More will die if we continue. We need to go back." "And abandon everything." Whitmore's face was flushed, his eyes wild. "The discovery of a lifetime, the proof that I've been looking for. No, we continue. Anyone who wants to leave can leave, but I'm going to the glacier. I'm going to find them." "You're going to die," Lakpa said. "Maybe," Whitmore said, "but I'd rather die pursuing something real than live wondering what I missed." The argument continued through the night and into the morning, but it was already decided. Whitmore would not be dissuaded, and the others, Fiona, Mark, Victor, were divided. Fiona wanted to leave, her journalist's instincts warring with her survival instincts. Mark wanted to continue, his hunger for content overriding his fear. And Victor was silent, watching, calculating, waiting for the moment when action would be required. In the end, they split. Lakpa and Fiona would descend, returning to Namche to report Pemba's death and summon help. Whitmore, Mark, and Victor would continue to the glacier, pursuing the footage that had started this nightmare. They parted at dawn, the sun rising over peaks that seemed to lean down to watch them, to judge them, to remember which humans had been wise and which had been foolish. Lakpa watched Whitmore's party disappear into the pass that led toward the glacier, and he felt a certainty that he would never see them again. He was almost right. The descent was harder than the ascent, the weight of what they had seen pressing down on Lakpa and Fiona with every step. They spoke little, conserving their energy and their breath, focusing on the simple mechanical task of putting one foot in front of the other. But Lakpa's mind was racing, turning over the evidence, trying to fit it into a framework that made sense. The Yeti, if they existed, were not animals. That much was clear from the footprints, from the hunting behavior, from the way they had coordinated their attack. They were intelligent, tool-using, social. They sang, which suggested culture, tradition, communication. They left tokens, the hand on the prayer wheel, the leg frozen in the ice, which suggested ritual, symbolism, meaning. They were human, or had been, or something close to human, a parallel evolution, a branch of the hominid family tree that had taken a different path. The DNA samples would tell him more if he ever got them to a laboratory, but he already suspected what they would show, something that was closer to Homo sapiens than to any other primate, but different enough to be a separate species. "You're thinking about them," Fiona said, breaking the silence as they stopped to rest on a rocky outcrop. "The Yeti, you're trying to figure out what they are." I'm trying to figure out how to survive them, Lakpa said. Classification is for later, if there is a later. You think they're going to kill Whitmore? I think they've already killed him, Lakpa said. I just don't think he knows it yet. They reached Namche Bazaar 2 days later, exhausted and traumatized, to find that Pemba's death had already been reported. The other porters had reached the village before them, spreading word of the attack, the singing, the creatures on the ridge. The police were waiting, along with representatives from the Ministry of Tourism and the various climbing organizations that regulated access to the region. Lakpa told them everything. The tracks, the body, the singing, the creatures on the ridge. He didn't use the word Yeti, didn't invoke the legends that would make his account less credible. He described what he had seen in scientific terms as a witness rather than a believer, and he could see the doubt in their eyes. Dr. Dorge, the police inspector said, a young man named Ramesh who had clearly been sent to handle this because no one more senior wanted the assignment. You're suggesting that an unknown hominid species killed your porter? I'm suggesting that something killed him, Lakpa said. Something with intelligence, with strength beyond human capability, with the ability to coordinate an attack. Whether that's a Yeti or something else, I don't know, but I know what I saw. And the others, Mr. Whitmore and his team. They continued to the glacier, against my advice. Ramesh made notes in his pad, his expression suggesting that he was humoring a madman. We'll send a team to investigate, he said, to recover the body, to search for the missing expedition members, but I must tell you, Dr. Dorge, that your account is difficult to accept. I know, Lakpa said. I wouldn't accept it either if I hadn't seen it. He was allowed to leave after giving his statement, after promising to remain in Namche until the investigation was complete. He found a room at Dawa's tea house, the same room he had occupied before, and he collapsed into sleep without eating, without washing, without the rituals that usually marked the end of a day's travel. He dreamed of the Yeti. He dreamed of standing in a vast cavern of ice, surrounded by creatures that walked like men but were not men, that watched him with eyes that held intelligence beyond his understanding. They sang to him the same song he had heard in the night, and he understood the words now, understood that it was an invitation, a welcome, a request for him to join them. You are one of us, they sang. You have always been one of us. Come home, brother, come home. He woke screaming, the dawn light streaming through the window, his body covered in sweat despite the cold. Dawa was at his door, her face concerned, asking if he was ill, if he needed a doctor, if he wanted breakfast. No, Lakpa said, I need to go back. Back, Dawa asked, back where? To the glacier, Lakpa said. They're going to die, all of them, and it's my fault. I led them there. I have to try to save them. He was on the trail within the hour, despite Dawa's protests, despite the warnings of the police, despite the knowledge that he was probably walking to his own death. He climbed alone, moving faster than was safe, pushing his aging body to limits that he had thought were behind him. He had to reach them. He had to warn them, help them, bring them back. Whatever was waiting at the glacier, whatever had killed Pemba, it was patient, it was hungry, and it was not finished with the humans who had dared to enter its territory. He had seen the future in his dream, and he knew that time was running out. The Yeti were singing again. He could hear them even now, their voices carrying on the wind that blew from the ice. They were calling to him, inviting him, welcoming him to the hunt. And he was afraid, more afraid than he had ever been in his life, that he was going to answer. The trail to the Khumbu Glacier had never been easy, but in the wake of Pemba's death it had become something else entirely. A path through territory that had been claimed by forces older than human habitation. A route that wound through the hunting grounds of predators that remembered when men were prey. Lakpa climbed alone, his pack light, his movements fueled by desperation and the memory of his dream, the invitation that still echoed in his ears. He passed through Namche without stopping, ignoring the shouts of the police inspector who had just finished taking his statement, ignoring the warnings of the porters who had already fled the region, ignoring the voice of reason that told him this was suicide. He climbed higher, into air that grew thinner with every step, into cold that bit through his clothing and numbed his fingers and made his breath visible in clouds that froze instantly on his beard. On the second day, he reached the valley where they had made camp, where Pemba had died, where the Yeti had watched them from the ridge. The body was gone, taken by the police or by scavengers or by something else, but the blood remained, brown stains on stone that would remain until the next monsoon washed them away. Lakpa didn't stop to examine the scene. He knew what had happened here. He knew what was waiting ahead. He climbed toward the glacier, following the trail that Whitmore's party had taken. The tracks were fresh, no more than 2 days old, and they told a story of haste and fear. The stride was longer than it should have been, the placement uncertain, as if the climbers had been running from something even as they moved toward their destination. By afternoon, he could see the glacier itself, a river of ice that flowed down from the peaks like a frozen waterfall, its surface cracked and crevassed, its depths concealing secrets that had been buried for millennia. The wind here was different, carrying sounds that had no source, the creaking of ice under pressure, the cracking of frozen surfaces, and beneath it all, the singing. The Yeti were singing again, their voices rising and falling in patterns that suggested coordination, purpose, joy. Lakpa approached the glacier with the caution of a man entering a sacred space. He had studied these ice formations for decades, had written papers on their movement and their history, had drilled cores that revealed climate data going back thousands of years. But he had never approached them as they truly were, as the domain of something that lived in the cold, that thrived in the dark, that had made the ice its home. The entrance to the ice caves was visible from 100 yards away, a black maw in the white surface that seemed to lead down into the earth itself. It was here that Whitmore's footage had been taken, here that the hulking figure had been seen dragging its prey across the ice, and it was here that Lakpa found the first sign of what had happened to the others. Equipment, scattered across the snow in a pattern that suggested panic, flight, violence. A tent that had been torn open from the inside, its fabric shredded by something that wasn't claws but wasn't hands either. Sleeping bags stained with blood, dark against the white. And footprints, the same massive tracks that they had found at Pemba's death site, circling the camp, surrounding it, closing in. "Whitmore," Lakpa shouted, his voice swallowed by the wind and the ice. "Mark, Victor, anyone?" No answer. Only the singing, which grew louder as he approached the cave entrance, as if the Yeti were welcoming him, inviting him to enter, to descend, to see what waited in the dark. Lakpa had never been claustrophobic, had spent his career in cramped spaces, in ice cores and laboratory equipment, and the tight confines of research stations. But the cave mouth filled him with dread, with a certainty that what waited inside was worse than anything he had imagined, worse than anything that could exist in the rational world he had believed in. He entered anyway. He had come this far. He couldn't turn back now. The cave was cold beyond cold, a temperature that seemed to freeze the air itself, that made every breath a struggle. Lakpa turned on his headlamp, the beam cutting through the darkness to reveal walls of ice that glowed blue and green with the light that filtered through from the surface. The passage descended, winding deeper into the glacier, and he followed it with the certainty of a man who has already accepted his fate. The singing grew louder as he descended, filling the tunnel with sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He could hear the voices more clearly now, not just the harmonies but the individual tones, the variety of pitches that suggested multiple singers, a chorus of the ancient and hungry. They were singing in a language that he didn't recognize, but the melody was familiar, the same song he had heard in his dream, the invitation to join them. He found Mark Chen 200 yards down the passage. The YouTuber was sitting against the wall of ice, his camera clutched in his hands, his eyes open but unseeing. He was alive. Lakpa could see his breath, could hear his heartbeat in the silence between the singing. But he was broken, traumatized, lost in a reality that had overwhelmed his capacity to understand. "Mark," Lakpa said, kneeling beside him. "Mark, can you hear me?" Mark turned slowly, his eyes focusing on Lakpa with difficulty. They took him," he said, his voice barely audible. "They took Whitmore, I saw it, I filmed it. Oh God, I filmed it all." "What did you see?" Lakpa asked. "The Yeti," Mark said. "The real thing, not a bear, not a hoax. They came out of the ice, Dr. Dorge. They came out of the walls. There were so many of them, so many. And they took him. They took him down into the dark." "Where's Victor?" Lakpa asked. "He tried to fight them," Mark said and laughed, the sound brittle and insane. "He shot at them. He hit one, I think, but there were too many. They tore him apart. I saw it. I saw them tear him apart." "And you?" Lakpa asked. "Why didn't they take you?" Mark held up his camera, the screen cracked but still functional. "I showed them," he said. "I showed them that I was watching. They like to be watched, Dr. Dorge. They want people to know. They want the world to see. That's why they let me go, so I could tell, so I could show everyone." "Show them what?" Mark pressed a button on the camera, and the screen lit up with footage that made Lakpa's blood run cold. It was dark, the image grainy and green from night vision, but the shapes were clear enough. Massive figures, bipedal, moving through the ice cave with a coordination that suggested intelligence, planning, purpose. They surrounded the camp, 10 or 12 of them, converging from all directions with a silence that was more terrifying than any roar. And then the attack. The video shook as Mark ran, but the sounds were unmistakable. Whitmore's scream, cut short. Victor's shouts, his gun firing, the wet impact of bullets on flesh. And then the tearing, the ripping, the sounds of consumption that had no place in any world Lakpa recognized. "I got it all," Mark said, his voice dreamy, disconnected. "Millions of views. This is going to get millions of views." "We need to get out of here," Lakpa said, pulling Mark to his feet. "Can you walk?" "Walk?" Mark laughed again. "I don't want to walk. I want to see more. I want to see where they took him. I want to see what's down there." "There's nothing down there," Lakpa lied. "Nothing but ice. We need to go now." But Mark was already moving away, shambling deeper into the cave, drawn by the singing that grew louder with every step. "They're calling me," he said. "Can't you hear it? They're calling my name. They want to show me. They want me to see." Lakpa grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back, but Mark was stronger than he looked, driven by a compulsion that transcended fear. He shrugged off Lakpa's grip and continued down the passage, his camera held out before him like a shield or like an offering. Lakpa followed, because he couldn't let Mark go alone, because he needed to find Whitmore, because he had come this far and couldn't turn back. The passage twisted and turned, descending ever deeper into the glacier, until the light from the entrance was gone and they were surrounded by walls of ice that glowed with their own luminescence, that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the singing. They emerged into a cavern that took Lakpa's breath away. It was vast, larger than any ice formation he had ever encountered, larger than any space that should exist within a glacier. The ceiling was lost in darkness far above, and the floor descended into shadows that his headlamp couldn't penetrate. But it was the walls that held his attention, walls that were covered in carvings, etchings, paintings in pigments that had been preserved by the cold for millennia. They were handprints, thousands of handprints covering every surface, pressed into the ice with a force that had left impressions that would last until the glacier melted. Some were human, 5-fingered, sized for ordinary hands. Others were larger, much larger, with 6 fingers, 7, 8, arranged in patterns that suggested counting, mathematics, meaning. And then there were the others, the prints that weren't human at all, that weren't primate, that belonged to something else entirely. Claw marks, hundreds of them, arranged in spirals and circles and shapes that hurt Lakpa's eyes to look at. "They've been here," Mark whispered, his camera recording everything. "They've been here forever. This is their place. This is where they live." No one could live here, Lakpa said. It's too cold. There's no food, no water, no. They don't need what we need, Mark said. Don't you understand? They're not like us. They're not human, they're something else. Something that doesn't follow our rules. The singing stopped. In the sudden silence, Lakpa could hear his own heartbeat, Mark's breathing, the creaking of the ice as it settled around them. And then, from the darkness at the far end of the cavern, came movement. They emerged slowly, deliberately, as if they had been waiting for an audience. The Yeti, the creatures that had haunted these mountains for millennia. There were more than Lakpa had imagined, more than could possibly exist without being detected, without being photographed, without being proven. They were massive, 8 feet tall or more, covered in matted hair that ranged from white to brown to black. Their bodies were humanoid but wrong, the proportions slightly off, the limbs too long, the torsos too broad. Their faces were almost human, almost recognizable, but the eyes were different. The eyes were ancient, patient, intelligent in a way that suggested they had been watching humanity for longer than history recorded. And they were organized. That was the most terrifying thing. They moved in formation, surrounding Lakpa and Mark with a coordination that suggested communication, planning, culture. The largest of them stepped forward, and Lakpa saw that it was carrying something in its hands. Whitmore's head. The American's face was frozen in an expression of terror that would never melt, his eyes open, his mouth twisted in a scream that had been silenced. The creature held it up, displaying it, and then placed it carefully on a ledge of ice as if it were an offering or a trophy. "Oh God," Mark whispered. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." The Yeti didn't attack. They stood, watching, waiting, and Lakpa realized that they were curious, interested, studying the humans who had dared to enter their domain. They weren't just animals. They were. They were scientists in their way, anthropologists observing the strange creatures who had invaded their territory. "We should go," Lakpa said, his voice barely audible. "Slowly, don't run, don't provoke them." "Go," Mark laughed, the sound high and broken. "We can't go, don't you see? This is the discovery, this is everything. We need to film, document, prove." He raised his camera, and the flash lit up the cavern. The Yeti moved, not with the slow deliberation of before, but with terrifying speed, with coordination that suggested they had been waiting for exactly this moment. Mark screamed as they reached him, as massive hands closed around his arms, his legs, his body. The camera fell, shattering on the ice, and Lakpa watched as the creatures carried Mark toward the wall, as they pressed him against the ice as they began to. He turned away. He couldn't watch. He couldn't help. He could only run, fleeing back up the passage, pursued by Mark's screams and the sounds of tearing and the singing that had started again, triumphant this time, celebratory. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs gave out, until he collapsed in the snow near the cave entrance, gasping for air that was too thin, too cold, too full of the scent of musk and blood. He lay there, waiting for the end, waiting for the creatures to emerge and finish what they had started. But they didn't come. The singing faded and the glacier was silent, and Lakpa realized that they had let him go, just as they had let Mark go briefly to spread the word, just as they had placed Pemba's body where it would be found. They were sending a message, a warning, an invitation to stay away. He crawled out of the cave, into the light of the setting sun, and began the long descent back to the world of the living. He was found by a search party 3 days later, wandering in a snowstorm, delirious with cold and hunger and trauma. They carried him back to Namche, to a hospital, to warmth and safety, and the impossibility of what he had to tell them. The official report called it an avalanche. The bodies of Whitmore, Mark, and Victor were never found, presumed buried under tons of ice. The expedition was written off as a tragedy, another statistic in the long history of Himalayan disasters. The footage from Mark's camera was lost, destroyed by the cold and the wet, or so the authorities claimed. Lakpa knew better. He had seen what was on that camera. He had seen the Yeti in their domain, living in the ice, hunting the humans who dared to disturb them. He knew that the footage existed, that someone had it, that the proof was out there waiting to be revealed. But he also knew that revealing it wouldn't help. The Yeti weren't a mystery to be solved. They were a warning to be heeded. They were the memory of a time when humans were not the dominant species, when the world belonged to older, hungrier things. He returned to Kathmandu, to his laboratory, to the hand that was still frozen in his freezer. He thought it again, examined it again, and this time he understood what he was seeing. Not just the remains of a dead man, but a message. The fingers were curled around the hair, holding it, displaying it. The Yeti had placed it on the prayer wheel deliberately, had wanted it to be found, had wanted the humans to know what they were capable of. The hair was the key. Lakpa ran tests, DNA analysis, protein sequencing, everything that modern science could offer, and the results confirmed what he already knew. The hair was primate, but not any primate that existed in the databases. It was close to human, close to the great apes, but different enough to be a separate species. A species that had evolved in isolation, in the cold, in the dark, developing characteristics that made them perfectly adapted to their environment. They were real, the Yeti were real, and they were watching. Lakpa published his findings in a paper that was rejected by every journal he submitted to. The evidence was flawed, the reviewers said. The samples were contaminated. The methodology was suspect. No reputable scientist would associate their name with such claims. He didn't care. He knew the truth. He had seen them, heard them, smelled them. He had felt their attention, their hunger, their ancient patience. And he knew that they were still out there, still waiting, still remembering when men were prey. He returned to the mountains once, a year later, alone, carrying only the kukri knife that Karma had given him, etched with mantras that were meant to ward off evil. He climbed to the glacier, to the cave, to the place where everything had changed. The cave was gone, collapsed perhaps, or sealed by ice that had shifted in the year since his visit. There was no entrance, no passage, no way to descend into the depths where the Yeti lived. They had closed their door, or it had closed itself, and Lakpa was left standing on the surface, staring at ice that gave no hint of what lay beneath. But he could hear them. The singing, faint but unmistakable, rising from the depths like a memory, like a promise, like a warning. They were still there. They would always be there, waiting for the next human who dared to disturb them, who dared to claim their territory, who dared to forget that the world was older and hungrier than any human civilization. He placed an offering on the ice, a bundle of sage and cedar, the traditional herbs of his people, burned with a prayer for the dead and a warning for the living. And then he turned and walked away, back to the world of warmth and light and human company. He never returned to the mountains. He moved to the city, to a place where the walls were thick and the windows were small and the only sounds were the traffic and the neighbors and the endless hum of human activity. He grew old slowly, and he told no one about what he had seen, what he had learned, what he knew about the world that waited beneath the ice. But sometimes in the night he heard the singing, and he knew that they were still out there, still waiting, still remembering. And he knew that one day they would remember again. One day the ice would melt, or the humans would push too far, or the balance would shift, and the Yeti would emerge from their caves to reclaim what had once been theirs. When that day came, Lakpa would be gone, but he had left a record, hidden in files that no one would believe, in evidence that no one would accept. He had done what he could to warn the world. The rest was up to the future, to the humans who came after, who would have to learn the same lessons that he had learned in the ice and the dark, who would have to understand that some doors should remain closed, some knowledge should remain forbidden, and some places belonged to the things that had lived there before humans walked the earth. The Glaciers Maw was closed, but it would open again. It was only a matter of time. And when it did, the Yeti would be waiting. The package arrived at Lakpa's apartment in Kathmandu on the morning of the winter solstice. exactly 3 years after he had returned from the glacier. It was wrapped in cloth that had once been white, but was now brown with age and stains that might have been rust or might have been something else. There was no return address, no sender information, only his name written in a hand that he didn't recognize but somehow knew. He opened it on his kitchen table, using the cookery knife that he had carried since that final visit to the ice. Inside the cloth was an object that made his hands shake and his breath catch in his throat. The kukri, the knife that Karma had given him, that he had left as an offering at the glacier, that he had assumed was lost forever. It was changed. The blade, once bright with etched mantras, was now crusted with a brownish residue that flaked away when he touched it. The residue had a smell, old, ancient, the smell of the glacier and the caves and the creatures that lived in the dark. And on the handle, carved into the wood with a tool that had left precise, deliberate marks, were words in a language that Lakpa couldn't read but somehow understood. "You are marked," returned the blade. He stared at the words for a long time, his mind racing through implications, possibilities, terrors. They knew where he lived. They knew how to reach him. They had kept the knife, preserved it, modified it, and now they were returning it with a message that was as clear as it was terrifying. He was marked. They had claimed him in some way that he didn't fully understand, and they wanted him to return, to the glacier, to the ice, to them. Lakpa spent 3 days in his apartment, the curtains drawn, the phone unplugged, the world outside forgotten. He didn't eat, barely slept, sat in the dark with the knife on the table before him, trying to understand what was happening, what they wanted, what he should do. On the 3rd day, he understood. The marking wasn't just a claim. It was an invitation. The Yeti didn't want to kill him. They wanted to recruit him. They had seen something in him, in the way he had survived, in the way he had understood, that made him valuable. They wanted him to join them, to become one of them, to wear their skin and sing their songs. It was the same choice that had been offered to others, he realized. The same temptation that had lured men and women throughout history into the dark places, into the cold, into the service of things that were older and hungrier than humanity. The choice between death and transformation, between ending and becoming. He had refused once. In the cave, faced with his grandmother's invitation, he had chosen to remain human, but the offer hadn't been withdrawn. It had simply been deferred. They were patient, the Yeti. They could wait decades, centuries, for the right vessel to accept their gift. Lakpa looked at the knife, at the residue that crusted its blade, and he knew what he had to do. He couldn't ignore the invitation. He couldn't pretend that the marking didn't exist. He had to face them one last time and make his choice clear. He would return to the glacier, but he wouldn't go alone, and he wouldn't go to accept their offer. He made calls to Fiona Crawford, who had survived the expedition by descending with him, who had written articles that no one believed, who had spent the last 3 years trying to convince the world that the Yeti were real. To Viktor Sokolov, who had somehow survived the attack in the cave, who had been found wandering in the snow with wounds that should have killed him, who had been changed by his contact with the creatures in ways that he didn't fully understand. To others, scientists, explorers, believers, and skeptics, who had encountered the Yeti and survived. They came to Kathmandu, gathering in Lakpa's small apartment, sharing stories that were too similar to be coincidence. Each had been marked in their way, had been offered the transformation, had refused or accepted in different measures. They were the survivors, the witnesses, the ones who knew the truth. "They want us to come back," Lakpa told them, holding up the knife. "They're inviting us, all of us who refused them, who survived them, who know what they are." "Why?" Fiona asked. "What do they want from us?" "They want us to join them," Victor said. His voice was different now, deeper, carrying resonances that hadn't been there before the attack. "They want us to become their servants, their eyes and ears in the human world." "And if we refuse?" another survivor asked. "Then we die," Lakpa said. "Or worse, we become their food, their their raw material. "So we're damned either way," Fiona said. "Not necessarily," Lakpa said. "There's a third option. We can fight. We can take the fight to them, into their territory on their terms. We can hurt them, weaken them, drive them back into the deep places where they came from." "How?" Victor asked. "They're ancient, they're powerful there." "They're vulnerable," Lakpa interrupted. "I saw it. In the cave when I faced them. They're vulnerable when they transform, when they're between skins. And they're vulnerable to the things that their own kind fear. The kukri, the mantras, the white ash. We have weapons. We just need to use them." The plan was desperate, suicidal, the kind of strategy that only the already damned would attempt. They would return to the glacier, not as explorers but as soldiers. They would descend into the ice, find the Yeti in their lair, and attack them at their most vulnerable. They would burn the caves, collapse the passages, destroy the records that the creatures had kept for millennia. They would erase them from the world, or die trying. The expedition left Kathmandu on the first day of the new year, 13 survivors of the Yeti's hunger, armed with the weapons of their enemies and the knowledge of their weakness. They climbed in silence, each carrying their own fear, their own memories, their own reasons for being there. The glacier was waiting. The ice was thicker than before, the cave entrance sealed by fresh snow. But Lakpa knew where to dig, where to cut, where to force an opening. They descended into the dark with headlamps and torches and the kukri knives that Karma had provided, into the cold that was more than temperature, into the silence that was heavy with waiting. The Yeti were there. They were always there. They emerged from the walls, from the ice, from the shadows that had seemed empty moments before. But they weren't attacking. They were watching, waiting, curious about the humans who had returned, who were armed, who weren't running. "We know what you want," Lakpa said, his voice echoing in the cavern. "We know what you offer, and we reject it, all of us. We choose to remain human." The largest of the Yeti stepped forward, the same creature that had displayed Whitmore's head, that had watched Lakpa with ancient patience. It spoke, its voice like the cracking of ice, like the wind through high passes. "You cannot reject what is already given," it said. "You are marked. You are ours. The transformation has already begun." "Then we stop it," Lakpa said. "We cut it out, we burn it away." He raised the kukri, the blade glowing with the residue that had transformed it, that made it a weapon capable of hurting the Yeti. The creature recoiled, and Lakpa saw the fear in its eyes, the vulnerability that he had suspected. "You cannot," the creature said. "You are too far, the change is too deep." "Watch us," Lakpa said. The battle was terrible, not the fighting. The Yeti didn't fight in the human sense, didn't attack with weapons or strategy. They fought with presence, with fear, with the weight of their ancient existence pressing down on the humans who dared to oppose them. They sang, and the song was an attack, a weapon that drove into the mind and soul, that offered transformation and power and escape from the suffering of the human condition. The survivors screamed. They screamed as the song tore at them, as it showed them what they could become, as it promised an end to pain and fear and death. One by one, they fell to their knees, reaching out to the creatures that had hunted them, accepting the offer that they had come to refuse. But Lakpa stood. He stood with the kukri raised, with the mantra etched on the blade glowing with light that had no source, and he sang back. He sang the songs that Karma had taught him, the prayers of protection and warding, the words that existed in the space between human language and the speech of the Yeti. His voice was weak compared to theirs, a single human throat against a chorus of ancient hunger, but it was enough. It was enough to create a space, a bubble of protection, a place where the Yeti's song couldn't reach. Now, he shouted, burn it all." They had brought fire, not ordinary fire but the chemical flames that burned hot enough to melt steel, to turn ice to steam, to consume anything in their path. The survivors who hadn't fallen to the song lit their torches, threw their grenades, turned the cavern into an inferno that drove the Yeti back, that forced them into the deeper passages, that burned the ice that had been their home. The creatures screamed, not the singing this time, but real screams, pain and fear and anger. They weren't used to being hurt. They weren't used to resistance. They were the hunters, the ancient, the dominant, and they had never faced prey that could fight back. Lakpa pressed his advantage. He advanced on the largest of the creatures, the one that had spoken, the one that had claimed him. He raised the kukri, and the blade shone with a light that was older than the sun, that came from the mantras that had been etched into the metal, from the prayers of generations of monks who had fought the Yeti and their kind. "You are marked," the creature said, but its voice was weaker now, uncertain. "You cannot kill what is eternal." "I'm not trying to kill you," Lakpa said. "I'm trying to free you." He struck. The kukri entered the creature's chest, not with the resistance of flesh but with the yielding of something else, something that had never been entirely physical. The creature convulsed, its form destabilizing, the humanoid shape melting, revealing what lay beneath. It was old, older than the ice, older than the mountains. A thing of hunger and memory and endless waiting, wearing the shape of a primate as a convenience, as a tool, as a way to interact with the physical world. And beneath that shape, Lakpa saw something that made him understand why the Yeti existed, why they hunted, why they remembered when men were prey. They were keeping something else at bay, something older, hungrier, that waited in the deep places and the dark. The Yeti were guardians in their way, maintaining a balance that had existed since before humans walked the earth. They hunted not for food but for sacrifice, to feed the thing below, to keep it sleeping, to prevent it from waking. And Lakpa had just killed one of them. The creature collapsed, its form dissolving into shadow and mist, leaving only the skin behind, the empty husk of the shape it had worn. The other Yeti screamed, a chorus of anguish that shook the cavern, that cracked the ice, that opened fissures in the walls that had stood for millennia. "Run," Lakpa shouted. "The ice is breaking, we need to get out." They ran. Those who could run, the survivors who had resisted the song, who had kept their humanity in the face of the offer. They ran up the passage, toward the surface, toward the light, as the cavern collapsed behind them, as the ice that had been the Yeti's home for thousands of years shattered and fell. They emerged into the blinding sunlight, into the cold air, into the world that was suddenly more precious than it had ever been. Behind them, the glacier rumbled and cracked, the collapse continuing, burying the caves, the creatures, the evidence of what had lived there. Lakpa stood at the edge of the ice, watching the destruction he had caused, and he felt not triumph but sorrow. He had killed one of them, driven the others back, but he hadn't understood. He hadn't known what they were protecting the world from, what sacrifice they made with their hunting, what balance they maintained. The thing below was waking now. He could feel it in the shaking of the ice, in the cold that was more than temperature, in the shadow that seemed to rise from the depths. The Yeti had been keeping it asleep, feeding it with their sacrifices, and now there was no one to feed it, no one to sing it back to sleep. "We need to go," Victor said, pulling at his arm. "Now before." "Before what?" Lakpa asked. "Before it wakes up, before it comes for us. It's too late for that, Victor. We killed the guardians, now we have to face what they were guarding." The glacier exploded. Not with fire, but with ice, with pressure, with the force of something that had been contained for too long. The surface shattered, sending boulders of ice flying, creating crevasses that opened like mouths, like wounds, like doorways. And from the depths something rose. It was the Yeti, but not as Lakpa had seen them. This was the thing beneath, the thing they had served, the thing that had made them what they were. It was massive, filling the sky, blocking out the sun, a shape that had no fixed form but suggested wings and tentacles and mouths that opened and closed with the rhythm of hunger. "We were prey," Lakpa whispered, understanding at last. "We were always prey. The Yeti were just shepherds, keeping us fat until the master was hungry." The thing descended. It didn't attack, didn't consume, not yet. It was curious, interested, examining the humans who had destroyed its servants. It reached out with appendages that weren't quite tentacles, weren't quite limbs, and touched Lakpa's face with a gentleness that was more terrifying than any violence. "You are different," it said, and the voice came from everywhere, from the ice, from the air, from inside Lakpa's own head. "You have killed my servants. You have destroyed my home. You have earned my attention." Lakpa stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything but stare into the depths of something that had existed before the earth was formed, before the sun was born, before time had meaning. "What do you want?" he managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. "What I have always wanted," the thing said. "To feed, to grow, to become. You have opened the door, little human. You have invited me to your world, and now I will dine." It rose higher, spreading across the sky, blocking out the sun, casting the mountains in shadow. And Lakpa understood what he had done, what they all had done, what the cost of their victory would be. They had killed the wolves, and now the bears were coming. The survivors ran. They ran down the mountain, toward the villages, toward the cities, toward the world that had no idea what was coming. Behind them the thing grew, consuming the glacier, the peaks, the sky itself. It was waking, rising, hungry after millennia of sleep. And there was no one left to stop it. Lakpa ran with them, his old legs carrying him as fast as they could, his lungs burning, his heart pounding. He had made a mistake, the worst mistake of his life. He had thought he was fighting monsters, but he had been fighting the only thing that stood between humanity and something worse. Now the something worse was here. They reached the village, the city, the civilization that had no defense against what was coming. The thing in the sky was visible now, to anyone who looked, a shadow that grew, that spread, that consumed the horizon. Panic spread. The news spread. The world watched as something that had been myth, legend, nightmare became real, became present, became hungry. And Lakpa stood in the streets of Kathmandu, watching the shadow descend, and he knew that this was the end. Not just of him, but of everything. The Yeti had been keeping the balance, maintaining the order, and he had destroyed them in his arrogance, his certainty, his refusal to understand. The shadow reached him. It touched him gently, almost lovingly, and he felt the transformation begin. Not the change that the Yeti offered, but something else, something deeper. He was becoming part of it, absorbed, consumed, made into something that would serve its hunger. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though he didn't know who he was apologizing to. "I'm so sorry." The shadow answered, not with words but with presence, with knowledge, with the understanding of what he had done and what it would cost. And then it consumed him, and Lakpa Dorj was gone, and the thing that had been waiting for millennia finally fed. The world didn't end that day. The thing didn't consume everything, didn't destroy humanity, didn't remake the world in its image. It was patient after all. It had waited this long. It could wait longer. But it was here now. It was awake, and it would never sleep again. In the mountains, in the ice, in the dark places that humans didn't go, the Yeti were gone. But something else had taken their place, something older and hungrier, something that remembered when the world was young and men were prey. And it was remembering again. The Glaciers Maw was open, and it would never close. The Orange Eyes of Dover. A novel of cosmic horror. Chapter 1: The Delivery. The package arrived on a Tuesday. Not the Tuesday that would be remembered in the history books, not the Tuesday that would change everything. That would come later, in blood and screaming, and the endless orange dark. This was just an ordinary Tuesday in February, the kind of gray, suffocating day that Massachusetts seemed to specialize in during the depths of winter. The sky pressed down like a dirty hand against the window panes, and the snow had turned to that particular shade of industrial brown that came from 3 weeks of traffic and road salt and accumulated grime. The kind of day that made you want to stay inside, pull the covers over your head and wait for spring. Lena Myers almost didn't open it. She had been sifting through the accumulated debris of her professional life: grant rejection letters, unreturned calls from producers who had lost interest, scribbled notes for documentary projects that would never see the light of day, when the package appeared on her doorstep. No postage stamp she could see, no return address, just her name written in spidery, uncertain handwriting that looked like it had been applied with a shaking hand. The box itself was unremarkable: cardboard, slightly water-damaged, smelling faintly of mildew and something else, something organic and sweet that she couldn't quite identify. Like ripe fruit left too long in the sun. Like fermentation. Like decay. Lena was 34 years old and had spent the last 8 years chasing ghosts. Not literal ghosts. She didn't believe in such things. But the ghosts of stories, of mysteries that nobody wanted solved, of truths that powerful people had buried beneath layers of official denial and bureaucratic indifference. Her first documentary, on the contamination of groundwater in rural Maine, had won a small award at a smaller festival and had done nothing to stop the contamination. Her second, on police corruption in Providence, had been sued into oblivion before it could be released. Her third had been about her mother, and that one she couldn't watch without feeling like she was drowning in open air. She was, in other words, exactly the kind of person who received packages like this. The desperate kind. The broken kind. The kind who couldn't stop picking at scabs, who couldn't leave well enough alone, who had to know even when knowing would destroy her. The box yielded a single reel of Super 8 film, wound tight and smelling of vinegar, and a note written on yellowed paper that crumbled at the edges like ancient scroll. The note read, "It wasn't a moose." Just those 4 words, no explanation, no signature, no context. Lena held the film up to the light. Super 8. She hadn't seen one of these since film school, since that brief infatuation with analog formats that had died when she realized digital was cheaper, faster, and infinitely more forgiving. But something about this reel, the weight of it, the slightly greasy feel of the acetate, the way it caught the dim afternoon light and held it like a memory, made her skin prickle with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. She turned the reel over in her hands. Kodachrome II according to the label. That put it in the late 70s, early 80s. The leader tape was handwritten with a date, April 21, 1977. Nearly 50 years ago. Lena didn't have a projector. Nobody had projectors anymore, but she knew someone who did. The MIT Film Archive occupied a basement space that smelled perpetually of ozone and old coffee. Marcus Chen had been its curator for 23 years, and he had never once looked at Lena the way most people did, that mixture of pity and impatience that came from knowing someone's career had peaked before it had really begun. Marcus understood obsession. He had his own, old formats, obsolete technology, the physical media that held memories more precious than gold. Super 8, he said, turning the reel over in his hands, his fingers caressing the acetate with a tenderness that might have been unsettling in another context. "Where'd you get this?" "Came in the mail, no return address." "Mysterious." "That's one word for it." Marcus led her to a back room where ancient equipment sat like mechanical dinosaurs, their lenses staring blankly at walls painted to serve as projection screens. He threaded the film with practiced fingers, the ritual of it almost religious, and flipped a switch. The projector hummed to life, its fan whirring, the bulb casting a cone of light that seemed too bright for such a gloomy space. "Here we go," Marcus murmured. The footage was grainy, the colors already shifting toward that peculiar amber that old film acquired as it degraded. It had been shot at night, that much was clear, a night illuminated by what looked like car headlights, or perhaps a large flashlight. The camera operator was moving, walking, their breathing audible on the thin audio track that accompanied the film. Lena could hear footsteps on gravel, the rustle of fabric, the occasional muttered curse. Then the camera steadied, fixed on a stone wall. It was an old wall, the kind built by hand from fieldstones gathered by farmers 2 centuries ago. The kind of wall that lined country roads throughout New England, crumbling now, overtaken by moss and lichen, but still standing because nobody had bothered to tear them down. This particular wall ran along what appeared to be a wooded area, trees visible in the background, their branches bare and skeletal against the night sky. For 30 seconds nothing happened, just the wall, just the trees. The camera operator's breathing, slightly accelerated, perhaps from exertion or from fear. Then something moved. It came from the right side of the frame, crawling along the top of the wall with a gait that made Lena's stomach tighten involuntarily. It moved like nothing she had ever seen, limbs that seemed to operate independently of each other, a spine that bent at angles that should have been impossible, a head that. "Pause it," she whispered. Marcus paused the film. The image froze, flickering slightly, showing the creature caught in mid-motion. It was the size of a large dog, perhaps, or a small deer, but that was where any resemblance to normal wildlife ended. The skin looked rough, textured, like sandpaper that had been soaked and dried repeatedly until it cracked and split. The limbs were too long, each joint articulated in a way that suggested multiple points of bending, fingers that splayed and gripped the stone with what looked like suction cups, or perhaps something worse. "What is that?" Marcus asked. "Some kind of puppet?" "I don't know, play it." The film resumed. The creature continued its passage along the wall, and now Lena could see its face, or what passed for a face. The features seemed to shift as it moved, as if the thing's anatomy was still deciding what shape it wanted to be. But the eyes, those were constant. 2 points of light, glowing with an orange luminescence that seemed to come from within rather than reflecting the camera's light source. The camera zoomed in. Whoever was filming wanted a closer look, wanted to capture this thing in detail. The creature stopped. It turned. And for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, it looked directly into the lens. The eyes filled the frame. Those terrible orange eyes, pupils slit like a cat's but wrong somehow, the color too intense, too saturated like molten copper or the heart of a fire that burned without fuel. Then the film cut. Not ended, cut. Abruptly, violently, as if the camera had been dropped or struck. The last frame was a blur of motion, a glimpse of something pale against the darkness, and then nothing but the white leader tape flapping against the projector gate. "That's it?" Lena asked. "That's all there is." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the projector's fan wind down. Marcus cleared his throat. "Where did you say this came from?" "I didn't, just showed up at my door." "And the note?" Lena took it out of her pocket, smoothed it against her thigh. It wasn't a moose. "Cryptic." "There's more. Look at the film leader." Marcus examined the reel more closely, using a magnifying glass to study the markings. Kodachrome II, that puts it in the late 70s, early 80s, and there's a date code here, looks like April 1977. Nearly 50 years ago. "Whoever sent this wanted me to see it," Lena said. "Wanted someone to see it." "And what do you think you saw?" Lena thought of the eyes, the way they had seemed to look through the camera, through the film, through the decades that separated that moment from this one, the way they had looked at her. "I think I saw something that shouldn't exist," she said. Chapter 2: The Research. She spent the next 3 weeks researching. The date on the film, April 1977, meant something to her, tickled at the edge of her memory like a word on the tip of her tongue. She searched through newspaper archives, through local history databases, through the folklore collections that academics maintained for reasons she had never quite understood. She found it on a website dedicated to cryptozoology, sandwiched between articles about Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. The Dover Demon, they called it. A creature sighted over 2 nights in April 1977 in Dover, Massachusetts, a wealthy suburb about 20 miles southwest of Boston. 3 teenagers had reported seeing it. Bill Bartlett on the first night, John Baxter and Will Taintor on the second. The descriptions matched what she had seen in the film almost exactly. The textured skin, the elongated limbs, the glowing orange eyes. The case had never been solved. Skeptics suggested it was a foal, a newborn moose calf, a misidentified animal of some kind. But the witnesses had been adamant, and their descriptions had been too specific, too consistent with each other to dismiss entirely. Lena read everything she could find. She found Bartlett's original sketch, published in a local newspaper and now reproduced across dozens of websites. She found interviews with the witnesses, some conducted years later, in which they stuck to their stories despite decades of ridicule. She found academic papers analyzing the case, psychological profiles suggesting mass hysteria or shared hallucination. What she didn't find was the film. No mention of any footage. No suggestion that anyone had captured the creature on camera. Which meant either the film was a fake, a meticulously crafted hoax using period-appropriate equipment and techniques, or it was evidence that had been suppressed, hidden away for 47 years by someone who didn't want the world to know what had really happened in Dover. Lena knew which possibility she preferred. She also knew which one was more likely. But she couldn't stop thinking about those eyes, the way they had looked at her. She started making phone calls. The first few were dead ends. John Baxter had died in 1998, killed in a car accident that some suggested wasn't an accident at all. Will Taintor had moved to California in the 80s, changed his name, died in 1989 under circumstances that remained mysterious. The police officers who had investigated the original sightings were long retired or dead. The journalists had moved on to other stories, other scandals, other mysteries. But Bill Bartlett was still alive, still in Massachusetts, still carrying the burden of what he had seen on that April night so long ago. She found him through a private investigator, a favor called in from her documentary days. William Bartlett, age 65, lived in a garage on the outskirts of Lowell, where he apparently worked as a mechanic. He had no phone listing, no email address, no social media presence, just an address and a reputation for being unfriendly to strangers. Lena called 3 times before he answered, and when he did, his voice was rough with suspicion and decades of accumulated bitterness. "I don't talk about that anymore," he said, as soon as she mentioned the demon. "Mr. Bartlett, I've seen something, footage from 1977. I think you need to." "I said I don't talk about it." "It wasn't a moose, was it?" Silence. She could hear him breathing, could hear the clink of tools in the background, the distant whine of an air compressor. "Who sent you?" he asked finally. "Nobody. I received a package film I saw." "What's your name?" "Lena Myers. I'm a documentary filmmaker." "Documentary?" He made the word sound like a curse. "Vultures, all of you, coming around every few years, wanting me to tell my story so you can make your little movies and your little podcasts, and then move on to the next freak show." "This isn't like that. I have evidence, physical evidence." "Evidence?" He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Lady, I've been hearing about evidence for 47 years. Nothing changes, nothing helps. People still think I'm crazy or a liar or both. Please, just let me show you what I have." Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, dropped to a whisper that she could barely hear over the background noise. "You mentioned the film. Describe it to me." Lena closed her eyes, remembering. Night footage, someone walking along a stone wall, then the creature, your creature, crawling along the top, and then it looked at the camera, those eyes, those orange eyes. "Stop," he said. "Stop, don't say anything else." "Mr. Bartlett." "Where are you?" "Cambridge." "Drive to Lowell. Tonight, I'll give you the address. But if you're lying to me, if this is some kind of prank or setup, I'm not lying. You'd better not be, because if you are, you'll be sorry, and if you're not, he paused. If you're not, then God help you, God help us both. He hung up. Lena sat for a long moment, staring at her phone. The afternoon light was fading, and the apartment felt suddenly cold, as if someone had opened a window she couldn't see. She looked at her hands, steady, she noted with distant pride, and thought about what she was getting into. This was how it started. This was always how it started. A mystery, a story, a truth that someone didn't want told. She had chased these before, followed them down rabbit holes that led nowhere, or led to places that broke her heart, or led to places that broke something deeper than that. But she had never seen eyes like those. She had never felt, in the pit of her stomach, that she was looking at something that shouldn't exist, something that violated the basic rules of reality simply by being visible. She grabbed her coat and her keys. She had a drive ahead of her, and she didn't want to be late. Chapter 3: The Mechanic. Bartlett's garage was exactly what she expected. A corrugated metal building on a back road, surrounded by the rusting hulks of cars that would never run again. The sign above the bay door read Bartlett's Auto Repair in faded paint, and beneath it someone had added in what looked like black marker, "Cash only. No CHECKS. No questions." He was waiting for her outside, a man in his mid-60s, thick arms crossed over a stained work shirt. He looked like every other mechanic she had ever seen, except for his eyes. They were too alert, too watchful, moving constantly as if expecting something to appear from the darkness beyond the reach of the single security light. "Show me," he said without preamble. Lena had brought her laptop, had transferred the digitized footage to a file she could play anywhere. She opened it now, turned the screen toward him, and pressed play. Bartlett watched without speaking. His face revealed nothing, no recognition, no surprise, no fear. But when the eyes appeared, when those orange orbs filled the screen, he took a step backward, his hand going to his chest as if to steady his heart. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "It came in the mail. No return address, just the note." "Show me the note." She handed him the paper. He held it up to the light, examined it from multiple angles, then brought it to his nose and smelled it. "This is old," he said. "This paper is from the 70s. I know because I had paper just like it in high school, had that same smell. Chemical, like something burning." "So it's real, the film is real." Bartlett looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she was worthy of whatever he was about to say. Then he nodded toward the garage. "Inside, not out here." The garage was a cathedral of mechanical debris, engines in various states of disassembly, tools hung on pegboards in arrangements that suggested obsessive organization, and everywhere drawings, sketches pinned to walls, taped to tool chests, scattered on workbenches, all of the same subject, the creature, the demon. But these were not the sketches from the newspaper articles. These were different. These showed variations, permutations, the same basic form but twisted in subtle ways. Longer limbs in some, multiple joints in others, and the heads, God, the heads. Some showed the smooth, featureless face from the original sighting. Others showed protrusions, growths, what looked like buds or tumors that hadn't fully developed. And one sketch, larger than the others, pinned to the wall above his workbench, showed something that made Lena's blood run cold. A head shaped like a figure 8. Two heads fused together, overlapping with eyes in both faces. "You've been drawing it," Lena said, "all these years." "Couldn't stop," Bartlett said. "Every night. Every single night since April 21, 1977. I close my eyes and I see it. So I draw it trying to get it out of my head. But it doesn't work. It never works." He led her to a back room, a makeshift living space with a cot, a hot plate, and a mini fridge. The walls here were covered with newspaper clippings, photographs, maps. A timeline ran along one wall, hand-drawn in marker, beginning with that date in 1977 and continuing to the present. I've been tracking it, Bartlett said. Not just the original sightings, everything. Every strange report from Dover, every missing pet, every unexplained noise in the woods, every child who wakes up screaming from a nightmare they can't describe. And what have you found? He turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that she had seen before in other witnesses, other survivors. The look of someone who had seen the edge of the world and couldn't forget the view. It's still here, he said. It never left. Whatever they told us, whatever they wanted us to believe, it never left Dover. It's just been waiting, growing, changing. Changing. You saw the film, you saw how it looked. He gestured to the sketches. But that's not how it looked to John Baxter. That's not how it looked to Will Taintor. They saw something different, something worse. How did you know? Because I found them. After the official story died down, after the reporters left and the skeptics moved on to the next thing, I found them. And we talked. We compared notes. And we realized that none of us had seen the same thing. Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the garage. What do you mean? I saw something with smooth skin like a frog's belly, long fingers but only 4 of them, a head shaped like a melon with those eyes set wide apart. He pointed to one of his sketches. Baxter saw something with textured skin like you saw, but he said the head was wrong, said it looked like 2 heads fused together, like a figure 8. A figure 8. That's what he said, and he was terrified, more terrified than I was, and I was pretty damn terrified. He said when it looked at him, he felt like it was seeing something in him, something he didn't know was there. And Will Taintor? Taintor saw it from a distance, through binoculars. He said it had too many limbs, 6, maybe 8, crawling like a spider. He wouldn't talk about it after that. Moved to California, changed his name, died in a car accident in 1989. Lena tried to process this. Multiple witnesses, same creature, different descriptions. It didn't make sense. Either they were all lying, all hallucinating, all somehow infected by the same mass delusion, or the thing they had seen was capable of appearing differently to different observers. There's something else, Bartlett said. He reached under his cot and pulled out a metal box, the kind used for important documents. He opened it and removed a file folder, yellowed with age. The police report, the one they never released. Lena took it, opened it. Inside were photocopies of handwritten notes, typed reports and photographs. A farmer named Eugene Nasson had called the Dover police on the morning of April 22, 1977, reporting strange noises in the woods behind his property. The responding officer, a man named Frank Massily, had filed a report describing unusual biological material found on trees, unexplained vocalizations that sounded like a baby crying but wrong somehow, and a sense of profound unease that had caused him to leave the scene before completing his investigation. Massily resigned the next day, Bartlett said, left law enforcement entirely, moved to Florida, died in 1995, cancer. Did anyone follow up? Officially, no. Unofficially, Bartlett paused, seeming to wrestle with something. My father was part of a group, men who knew things or thought they knew things. They went into those woods that night, with guns, with flashlights, with other things, things from churches, from old traditions. What happened? They found it. Bartlett's voice was barely a whisper. They found it and they trapped it, in a well, old farm well, abandoned, dried up. They built a structure over it, sealed it. My father said. He said they weren't sure if they had killed it or just contained it, but they thought that would be enough. When was this? April 23, 1977, 2 days after the sightings. Lena looked at the timeline on the wall, at the string that connected that date to others stretching forward through the decades. But it wasn't enough. No, Bartlett said. It wasn't, because in 1984 the well was opened. Construction crew, new development going in. They didn't know what was down there. They just opened it up, looked inside, saw nothing, and moved on. Nothing. Nothing they recognized. But that night, a security guard at the construction site disappeared. Just gone. They found his flashlight still on, pointed at the well. And they found something else. Something they couldn't explain. What? Bartlett reached into the file folder and removed a photograph. It showed a patch of ground, illuminated by harsh flash photography. At first, Lena couldn't tell what she was looking at, just earth, disturbed soil, something that might have been a footprint. Then she saw it, the texture, the same rough, granular surface she had seen in the film, peeling away from the ground like shed skin, like a snake's discarded husk. They found this at 5 different sites over the next 20 years, Bartlett said. Always near the well, always after someone went missing, and always, there were witnesses who reported seeing something with orange eyes. Why didn't anyone do anything? They tried. They tried to seal the well again, to put up warnings to keep people away, but it kept happening. It keeps happening, just quietly now. No more newspaper articles, no more documentaries, just missing persons reports, cold cases, unexplained phenomena that nobody connects because nobody wants to see the pattern. Lena looked at the timeline again, at the dates that marched forward one after another, each marked with a name, a disappearance, a death. She counted them. 14 over 47 years. Not many by the standards of violent crime. Easy to dismiss as coincidence, as unrelated tragedies in a world full of tragedy. But she saw the pattern. She could not see it. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because of the film. Bartlett held up the note again, the spidery handwriting, the cryptic message. It wasn't a moose, that's what they said to us back then. The officials, the experts, it's just a moose calf, confused, lost. Nothing to worry about, but we knew. We knew what we saw, and whoever sent you this, they know too. They've known all along. Who? I don't know, but I think, he hesitated. I think it's time. I think it's been waiting for something, for someone, and I think that someone might be you. That's crazy. Is it? Bartlett gestured to the room around them, to the years of obsessive documentation, the drawings that covered every surface. You've seen it now. You've seen the eyes. You can't unknow that. You can't go back to your life and pretend this is just some story, some cryptid legend for bored internet users. You know what it is. You know what it means. What does it mean? Bartlett looked at her, and she saw the fear in him, the fear that had been eating him alive for 47 years. It means, he said, that we're not alone, that we never were. That something has been here in Dover, watching us, learning us, waiting for the right moment. And I think that moment is coming. Why now? Because of the date. He pointed to the timeline, to a date circled in red. April 22, 2024. Exactly 47 years since the original sightings. 47 years since we first saw it. That's not a coincidence. That's an anniversary. And anniversaries mean something to things like this. Lena looked at the date. It was 6 weeks away. What happens on the anniversary? I don't know, Bartlett said, but I'm going to find out, and you're going to help me, because you have the film and whoever sent it to you wanted you to be part of this. They wanted you to see. See what? The truth. Bartlett turned off the light, and in the sudden darkness his voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The truth about what it really is, what it really wants, and how to stop it. Can it be stopped? Silence. Then, I don't know, but we have to try, because if we don't, then everything we've built, everything we think we know about the world, it all ends. Not with a bang, with a whisper, with orange eyes in the darkness watching us, waiting for us to look away. Lena sat in the darkness, thinking about the film, about the creature crawling along the wall, about the way it had looked at the camera with something that might have been curiosity or hunger or recognition. She thought about her mother, dying in a hospital bed, whispering about the things she had seen in her final days, about the documentary she had never finished, the truth she had never told. She thought about the empty years behind her and the uncertain years ahead. "Okay," she said, "I'll help you." And in the darkness, something that might have been a smile crossed Bill Bartlett's face. "Then we'd better get started," he said. "We have 6 weeks to prepare, and I have a lot to teach you." Chapter 4: The Lessons. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of research, preparation, and mounting dread. Bartlett was a relentless teacher, drilling her on the details of the original sightings, the geography of Dover, the history of the well and its surroundings. He showed her maps marked with every reported incident, every strange occurrence, every unexplained phenomenon that might be connected to the creature. They went to Dover together, scouting the locations. The stone wall where Bartlett had first seen it, still standing, still overgrown with moss. The woods where Baxter had encountered his version. The site of the well, now covered by a housing development, the original structure buried beneath decades of construction. "It's still there," Bartlett assured her. "The well, they built over it but they couldn't fill it. It goes deep, deeper than they know." "How do you know?" "Because I went back, in 1998, dug down, found the original cap. It was warm. In the middle of winter, 6 feet down, and it was warm. And I heard something moving." "Why didn't you do something, call someone?" "I did. I called everyone I could think of. Police, FBI, newspapers. They thought I was crazy. They said the well was sealed, that there was nothing to worry about. And then," he paused, "then John Baxter died." "What happened?" "Car accident. Ran his car off the road into a tree. The police said he fell asleep at the wheel, but I knew him. I knew he hadn't slept well in years. He was afraid to sleep, afraid of what he might see." "You think the creature—" "I think it knew we were getting close. I think it protects itself. And I think it's been protecting itself for a very long time." They continued their preparations. Bartlett taught her how to use the equipment he had assembled over the years: night vision cameras, audio recorders, motion sensors, electromagnetic field detectors. He showed her the symbols he had researched, protective marks from various traditions that he hoped might offer some defense. "I don't know if any of this works," he admitted. "I don't know if anything works against something like this, but it's all we have." Lena contacted her old crew, the people who had worked with her on previous documentaries. Most refused, hearing only the crazy in her voice, the obsession that they recognized from their own burned-out phases. But 2 agreed: Marcus Chen from the Film Archive, who couldn't resist the mystery of the footage, and a sound engineer named Darrell Washington, who had never believed in anything but was willing to follow a good story. They met at Bartlett's garage on April 20, 2024, 2 days before the anniversary. "This is insane," Marcus said, examining the equipment. "You know this is insane, right?" "I know," Lena said. "And you're going anyway." "I'm going anyway." "Then I'm going with you." Darrell just shrugged. "I've recorded a lot of weird stuff over the years. Might as well add demonic cryptid to the list." Bartlett briefed them on the plan. They would enter the woods at midnight on April 21, the exact anniversary of the first sighting. They would set up their equipment at the site of the original wall, then move to the well, documenting everything. If the creature appeared, and Bartlett was certain it would, they would capture it on camera, record its sounds, gather whatever evidence they could. "And then?" Marcus asked. "And then we run," Bartlett said, "as fast as we can, and we hope it's enough." They spent the day testing equipment, charging batteries, going over the plan until they could recite it in their sleep. As evening approached, Bartlett took Lena aside. "There's something else you need to know," he said. "Something I haven't told the others." "What?" "The film, the one you received. I've been thinking about it, and I think I know who sent it." "Who?" "My father, before he died. He knew he was sick, knew he didn't have much time. He said he had made arrangements, said that when the time was right, someone would come, someone who could finish what he started. But your father died in 2015. I know, but he was careful, methodical. He would have prepared something, left instructions. The film, the note, it's exactly the kind of thing he would do. Why me? Why not just contact you directly? Because I failed. Bartlett's voice was heavy with old grief. Because I spent 40 years running from this, drawing my pictures, telling myself I was keeping watch when really I was just waiting. Waiting for someone else to take up the burden. Someone who still had hope. I don't know if I have hope, Bill. No, but you have curiosity. You have that need to know, to understand, to see what's really there. That's what this thing responds to. That's what it feeds on, maybe. The need to see. Lena thought about the eyes in the film, the way they had seemed to look back at her. Then why would your father send it to me? Why would he want me to see it? Because, Bartlett said, sometimes the only way to fight a monster is to look it in the eye, even if it costs you everything, especially then. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what they were about to do settling over them like a shroud. Get some rest, Bartlett said finally. Tomorrow night everything changes. Lena tried to sleep, curled on Bartlett's cot in the back room of the garage, surrounded by 40 years of fear and obsession. She dreamed of orange eyes, of walls that moved, of voices calling her name from places she couldn't see. When she woke, it was April 21, 2024. The anniversary had begun. Chapter 5: The Descent. The woods were different at night. Lena had walked in forests before, had filmed in remote locations, had faced darkness in many forms. But there was something about these particular woods, on this particular night, that felt wrong in a way she couldn't articulate. The trees seemed too close together, their branches reaching toward each other like fingers trying to touch. The air was too still, too heavy, carrying a smell that reminded her of the film, that organic sweetness that made her think of decay. They moved in single file, Bartlett in the lead, then Lena with her camera, then Marcus with the audio equipment, then Daryl with the lights. They had decided against using the lights unless necessary, preserving their night vision, moving by the faint glow of a half-moon filtered through dense cloud cover. This is the path, Bartlett whispered, his voice barely audible. The same path I walked in 77, the same wall up ahead. They reached it in 20 minutes. The wall was exactly as Lena had seen it in the film. Old stones, moss-covered, crumbling in places but still standing. And beyond it, the woods where something waited. They set up their equipment in silence. Motion sensors along the wall, cameras on tripods, audio recorders positioned to capture any sound. Bartlett marked the ground with his symbols, chalk lines that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Do you really think those will help? Marcus whispered. No, Bartlett said, but they make me feel better. They settled in to wait. Time passed strangely in the darkness. Lena checked her watch obsessively, watching the minutes crawl toward midnight, the exact moment of the original sighting. 11:45, 11:50, 11:55. Get ready, Bartlett breathed. They heard it before they saw it. A sound like sandpaper on stone, like something dragging itself along rough surfaces. Then movement, visible in the moonlight. A shape on top of the wall, crawling, limbs bending in directions that made Lena's stomach clench. Camera, Bartlett hissed. Lena was already filming, her hands steady by some miracle of muscle memory. She could see it now, see it clearly in the viewfinder. The creature from the film, the thing from Bartlett's drawings, crawling along the wall with that impossible gait. But it was different. The skin was wrong, more textured than she remembered from the footage, covered in what looked like eyes, small and dark, that blinked in the moonlight. The limbs were longer, too long, jointed at multiple points like the legs of a spider. And the head. Oh God, Marcus whispered, look at its head. It was the figure 8, Two heads fused together, the eyes, those terrible orange eyes, set in both faces, all of them looking in different directions, all of them seeing. Baxter was right, Bartlett said, his voice breaking. It changed again. The creature stopped. All of its eyes, dozens of them, not just the orange ones but the small dark ones covering its skin, all of them turned toward the group. "Don't move," Bartlett whispered. "Don't look away." But Lena couldn't have looked away if she wanted to. She was caught in that gaze, pinned like a butterfly to a board, feeling something probe at her mind, at her thoughts, at the deepest parts of herself. She saw things, flashes of memory that weren't hers, a world without stars, without light, where things like this crawled through endless caverns in the dark, a time before humans, before mammals, before anything that could be called life, a consciousness older than the sun, hungrier than the void. And she saw Dover, saw it through eyes that had watched it grow from forest to farmland to suburb, that had noted every change, every arrival, every departure, saw the well, deep and dark, and the things that moved in its depths, not one creature, dozens, hundreds, waiting, growing, learning. "It's not a creature," she heard herself say, her voice distant, disconnected from her body. "It's a colony, a hive. They're all connected." "Lena," Marcus's voice worried, afraid. "The original sighting, the one in the film, that was just a scout, a probe. The real thing is underground, in the well. It's been breeding, multiplying for 47 years. The creature on the wall made a sound. Not a growl, not a hiss, but something that might have been laughter. Wet, gurgling laughter. "It knows we know," Bartlett said. "It knows we see." "Then we need to run," Darrell said, his voice shaking. "We need to run right now." "No," Lena forced herself to lower the camera, to break eye contact with the thing on the wall. "No, we need to go to the well. We need to see what's really there." "Are you insane?" Marcus grabbed her arm. "That thing will kill us." "It won't," Lena said, and she didn't know how she knew, but she knew. "It needs us to see, to know, to spread the word. That's how it feeds, on attention, on belief, on fear." "Then we shouldn't give it what it wants." "It's too late." Bartlett's voice was hollow, defeated. "It's always been too late. Since 1977, since before that. It's been waiting for someone to document it, to prove it exists, and now we have." The creature had vanished from the wall. Lena hadn't seen it move, hadn't seen it leave. It was just gone. "Where did it go?" Darrell asked, spinning in a circle, his light cutting through the darkness. "The well," Lena said. "It's inviting us." "We shouldn't go," Marcus said. "We should leave right now, call the police, call the army, call someone." "There's no one to call," Bartlett said. "No one who would believe us, no one who could help." "Then we help ourselves. We go to the well, we see what's there, and we find a way to stop it." "Stop it," Bartlett laughed, a broken sound. "You don't stop something like this. You survive it if you're lucky." "Then we'll survive," Lena said. "And we'll document everything, so that the next person who finds this film, who gets this package, will know what they're facing, will know how to fight." They gathered their equipment and moved deeper into the woods, toward the well, toward whatever waited in the darkness. The trees seemed to lean toward them as they passed, branches catching at their clothes like fingers. The ground grew soft, marshy, sucking at their shoes. And always in the distance they could hear it, moving, waiting, breathing. The well was exactly where Bartlett had said it would be. Even under the housing development, even buried beneath decades of construction, they could feel it. A depression in the ground, a place where the grass grew differently, where the air seemed colder, heavier. Bartlett found the access point, a maintenance hatch, rusted but unlocked, leading down into the darkness beneath. "The original well is down there," he said, "below the foundations, below everything." "How far?" Marcus asked. 20 feet, maybe 30. "And we're just going to climb down, into the dark, with that thing running around." "It's not running around," Lena said. She could feel it now, feel its attention focused on this place, on this moment. It's here, waiting. They descended one by one, using the maintenance ladder, their lights cutting through the darkness. The air grew colder as they went down, and wetter, heavy with that sweet organic smell that Lena was learning to associate with the creature. At the bottom, they found the well. It was larger than she had expected. The opening was maybe 6 feet across, lined with old brick that had crumbled in places, revealing earth and roots behind it. The cap that Bartlett's father had constructed was still there, a metal plate welded to a frame, secured with heavy bolts. But the plate had been moved. Not removed, moved. Shifted just enough to reveal a gap, a space where something could squeeze through. Something thin, flexible, with too many joints. It opened it, Bartlett whispered. It opened it from the inside. How is that possible? Daryl asked. It's not, Lena said. None of this is possible, but it's happening anyway. They approached the well, their lights playing over its surface. From the gap they could hear sounds, movement, breathing, and something else, a wet, rhythmic noise that might have been chewing. What's down there? Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. Lena moved closer, peering into the gap. She could see the shaft descending into absolute darkness, the walls lined with something that reflected her light back at her, a sheen, a moisture, something that coated every surface. And then she saw movement. Below, deep in the well, something was climbing up. Not one thing, many things. We need to go, she said, backing away. Now, right now. What did you see? Bartlett grabbed her arm. Eyes, Lena said. Dozens of them, hundreds, they're all down there. They've been down there for years, multiplying, growing, and now they're coming up. The sound from the well changed. The chewing stopped, replaced by a rustling, a scraping, the sound of many limbs moving in confined spaces. Run, Bartlett said, run. They ran. Chapter 6, The Chase. The climb back up was a nightmare. The ladder seemed longer than it had on the way down, the rungs slick with condensation, their hands shaking too hard to grip properly. Daryl fell at one point, catching himself on a lower rung, screaming as something tore in his shoulder. Marcus helped him up, both of them sobbing with fear and exertion. They emerged into the night air, gasping, and found that the world had changed. The woods were alive with movement. Shapes in the darkness, crawling along the ground, climbing the trees, watching from the shadows with eyes that glowed orange in the moonlight. Not one creature, not even dozens. Hundreds. The trees, Lena breathed. Look at the trees. The bark was covered with handprints. Too small for a child, too numerous to count, pressed into the wood as if the creatures had been climbing, exploring, marking their territory. And the prints were fresh, the sap still oozing from where they had pressed. It's happening, Bartlett said. The hatching, the second wave. My father was wrong, it wasn't trapped, it was nesting. We need to get to the car, Marcus said. We need to get out of here. We can't, Lena said. She could see them now, see them clearly in the moonlight. The creatures were everywhere, surrounding them, blocking every path of escape. And they were still emerging from the well, from the ground, from places beneath the earth that had been hidden for decades. They had been waiting for this night, this anniversary, this moment when the stars aligned, or the conditions were right, or simply when enough belief had accumulated to give them strength. What do we do? Daryl asked, his voice breaking. We document, Lena said. We keep filming, we keep recording. That's all we can do. She raised her camera, capturing the impossible scene. The creatures crawling from the well, the trees covered in handprints, the woods alive with glowing orange eyes. She filmed until her battery died, then switched to her phone, then to Marcus's backup camera. We have to move, Bartlett said. They haven't attacked yet, they're just watching, but they will when they're ready. When will that be? When they decide they've learned enough, when they're ready to expand. They moved through the woods, the creatures parting before them like a sea, closing behind them like a trap. Lena felt their attention on her, hundreds of minds focused on her every movement, her every thought. It was like being naked in a crowded room, like having her skin peeled away to reveal what lay beneath. They're reading us, she realized. Learning us, that's what they do. They watch, they learn, they adapt. How do you know? Marcus asked. Because I can feel it, the connection. It's not just seeing them, it's being seen by them. They're in my head. Get them out, Daryl said, his voice rising toward panic. Get them out of your head. I can't. Lena stumbled, caught herself on a tree. The bark was warm under her hand, pulsing with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. It's too late. They've already seen me, already know me. Then we fight, Bartlett said. He pulled something from his pocket, a knife, old and rusted but sharp. My father left this, said it was blessed, consecrated, said it could hurt them. Do you believe that? I believe it's all we have. He lunged at the nearest creature, slashing with the knife. The blade connected, she heard the impact, wet and heavy, and the creature made a sound like tearing metal. It recoiled, its form seeming to blur and shift, becoming momentarily translucent. It works, Bartlett shouted. The knife works. But there were too many. Hundreds, maybe thousands, emerging from the well, from the ground, from the spaces between. They surrounded the group, closing in, their orange eyes glowing brighter, their forms becoming more solid, more real. We're not going to make it, Marcus said. We're not. The sound stopped him, a voice coming from the woods ahead, a human voice calling for help. Hello, is someone there? Please, I need help. It's a trick, Lena said. It's mimicking. No, Bartlett's face had gone pale as death. I know that voice, I'd know it anywhere. Who is it? John Baxter. Bartlett's voice was barely a whisper, but John Baxter died in 1998. The voice called again, closer now. Bill, is that you? Please, I can't see, it's so dark. Help me find my way out. Don't listen, Lena said. It's not him, it can't be him. But it sounds like him. Bartlett took a step toward the voice. It sounds exactly like him. That's what it does. It learns, it adapts. It becomes what you fear, what you love, what you... Bill, the voice was desperate now. They're coming. They're all around me. Please help me. Bartlett ran toward the voice, the knife raised, and the creatures parted to let him through. Lena screamed for him to stop, but he was gone, vanished into the darkness, following a voice that couldn't be real. We have to go after him, Marcus said. No, Lena grabbed his arm. No, we have to run while they're distracted, while they're... The scream cut her off. Bartlett's scream, high and piercing, filled with a terror that transcended words. It lasted for 5 seconds, maybe 10, then cut off abruptly. Silence. Then the laughter, wet, gurgling, multiplied by hundreds of voices. He's gone, Daryl said, crying. He's gone, they're going to kill us, we're going to die here. Not yet. Lena pulled them toward the path, toward where the car waited, miles away through woods filled with monsters. We run now, and we don't stop. They ran. Behind them the woods erupted in motion. The creatures gave chase, moving with that impossible speed, that terrible fluidity. Lena could hear them, feel them, sense them closing the distance with every step. Marcus fell. She helped him up. Daryl fell. She dragged him forward. They reached the car, somehow, miraculously, and piled inside. Lena fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking too badly to insert them into the ignition. Come on, come on. The keys slid in. The engine turned over. She floored the accelerator and the car lurched forward, headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the creatures that lined the road, watching them go. In the rearview mirror, Lena saw them wave. Dozens of spindly arms, raised in farewell, in promise. We'll see you again, the gesture said, soon. Chapter 7, The Aftermath. They drove until they reached the highway, then pulled over and sat in silence, shaking, unable to speak. Marcus was crying silently. Daryl was staring at his hands as if he couldn't recognize them. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked finally. "We tell people," Lena said. "We show them the footage, we make them believe." "And then what?" "And then," she didn't know, didn't have an answer. "And then we hope someone knows how to stop it." They went to the police first, told their story, showed the footage. The officers were skeptical, then concerned, then dismissive. They suggested Lena see a doctor, suggested stress and lack of sleep, suggested that she had imagined the whole thing. They went to the media next. Local news, national news, online platforms. Some ran the story, most didn't. The ones that did buried it under skepticism, under alleged and supposedly, and experts suggest. They went to scientists, to experts, to anyone who would listen. Most refused. A few watched the footage and went pale, asked questions they couldn't answer, then withdrew from contact. And through it all, Bartlett remained missing. His garage was searched, his property examined. No sign of him, no body, no explanation. Just the drawings, the maps, the timeline. And the note found on his workbench, written in a handwriting that wasn't his. 47 years, and 47 more, and 47 after that. Lena kept working on the documentary. She had enough footage for something, even if it wasn't everything she had hoped. She had interviews with Marcus and Daryl, both of whom refused to return to Dover. She had the original film, the note, the police reports. She had the truth, or part of it. But she didn't have Bartlett, didn't have the ending, didn't have the answer to the question that haunted her. What had happened in those woods, in those final moments when the creature had taken him? And she didn't have peace, because every night she dreamed of orange eyes. Every morning she woke with the certainty that something was watching her. Every moment she felt the connection, the link that had been forged in those woods, the thing that had seen her and now would never look away. The documentary premiered on October 1, 2024. It was called The Orange Eyes of Dover. It received mixed reviews. Some called it a masterpiece of investigative journalism. Others called it exploitation, sensationalism, a cash grab. 3 people who watched it called Lena afterward. All 3 reported seeing orange eyes in the days following. All 3 reported being watched. One of them moved away, changed her name, was found dead 6 months later. The other 2 stopped calling, stopped answering, stopped being found. Lena kept making films, kept telling stories, but she never went back to Dover. Not until the night of October 15, 2024, when she woke from a dream of Bartlett's voice calling her name and knew that she had to return. Just once more, just to see, just to understand. She drove through the night, arriving as the sun rose over Dover. The town looked normal, peaceful, a wealthy suburb waking up to another beautiful autumn day. But Lena could feel it, the wrongness, the presence beneath the surface. She walked to the well site. The housing development was quiet, the residents still sleeping. She found the maintenance hatch, climbed down, descended into the darkness. The well was open. The cap was gone. The shaft descended into blackness, and from that blackness came a sound, breathing, multiplied by hundreds of lungs. "Lena!" The voice came from below, Bartlett's voice, or what was left of it. "Lena, come down. Come see what we've become." She raised her camera, started filming. Captured the well, the darkness, the sound of something climbing up. "We're all here," the voice said. "All of us together forever." "Bill," she whispered. "Bill, can you hear me?" "Bill is here, but he's not alone. None of us are alone anymore." The first creature emerged from the well, then another, then another. Dozens climbing up the walls surrounding her, their orange eyes glowing in the darkness. "We've been waiting for you," they said in unison in Bartlett's voice. "Waiting for you to come back, to join us, to become part of the story." Lena backed toward the ladder. But the creatures blocked her path, surrounded her, pressed close enough to touch. "Don't be afraid," they said. "Don't run. This is what you wanted to see, to know, to understand." "I don't." "You do. You've always wanted this. The truth, the real truth." They reached for her. Their skin was warm, soft, almost human. Their eyes, so many eyes, held hers with a terrible gentleness. "Just look," they whispered. "Look and see." Lena looked. And in the eyes of the creatures, she saw everything. Every world they had consumed, every species they had absorbed, every mind they had joined to their own. She saw Bartlett, trapped in the orange dark, still conscious, still aware, part of the hive mind but still himself, still watching, still waiting. She saw John Baxter and Will Taintor and Officer Massily and all the others who had been taken over the years, all part of the same vast consciousness, all sharing the same endless orange night. And she saw herself, already there, already part of them, waiting for her body to catch up to her consciousness. "You see," the creature said, "you understand." "Yes," Lena whispered, "I see." The camera fell from her hands. She didn't notice. She was already gone, already part of the orange dark, already one with the eyes that watched and waited and never, ever slept. Chapter 8: The Investigation. Dr. Sarah Chen was 43 years old, a folklorist at MIT who had built her career studying urban legends, cryptid sightings, and the way stories spread through communities. She had interviewed hundreds of witnesses, analyzed thousands of accounts, and developed a reputation for being able to separate genuine experience from confabulation, mass hysteria from shared truth. When the Lena Myers documentary premiered, Sarah watched it with professional interest. When Myers disappeared, Sarah's interest became personal. She had known Lena briefly years ago. A conference on documentary ethics, a shared panel, drinks afterward. She remembered Lena's intensity, her refusal to accept easy answers, her obsession with truth even when truth was painful. She also remembered Lena's eyes, the same eyes she saw in the final footage, open, peaceful, and somehow wrong. Sarah obtained the case files through a colleague in the Dover Police Department. She read everything: the original 1977 reports, the missing persons cases, the witness statements. She watched the footage recovered from Lena's camera, frame by frame, until she could see what others had missed. The creatures weren't attacking, they were inviting. Every movement, every gesture, every sound was designed to draw the observer in, to make them want to see more, to know more, to understand. The orange eyes weren't threatening, they were welcoming. "Come closer," they said, "come see, come know." "It's a trap," she told her colleague, a psychologist named Dr. Marcus Webb who had consulted on the case. "The whole thing is a trap. The documentary, the footage, the story itself, it's designed to spread, to infect, to make people want to know more." "You're saying the creatures are using media to propagate." "I'm saying they're using belief, attention, the act of witnessing. Every person who watches that documentary, who reads about the case, who thinks about the orange eyes, they're feeding it, making it stronger." That's impossible." "Is it?" Sarah pulled out her research. "Look at the pattern. Every major outbreak of sightings follows media coverage. The original 1977 case exploded after the first newspaper article. The 1984 incident after a local TV report. And now, after Lena's documentary, we're seeing new reports from across New England, all describing the same thing: orange eyes, crawling movement, the sense of being watched. But those could be copycat reports, hysteria. They could be, but some of them are from people who haven't seen the documentary, who haven't heard the story, who just saw something." Webb looked at the files, the maps, the timeline Sarah had constructed. "What do you think is happening?" "I think," Sarah hesitated, knowing how crazy it would sound, "I think it's a mimetic entity, a consciousness that exists in the space between perception and belief. It needs to be seen to exist, needs to be believed to be real. And the more people who see it, who believe in it, who fear it, the stronger it becomes. And the documentary spreads it, multiplies it, creates new witnesses, new believers, new hosts. Webb was silent for a long moment. Then, what do? We stop it, we find the source, the well in Dover, and we destroy it, before it spreads any further. Destroy it how? Sarah pulled out the research she had done on the original containment, the symbols used by Bartlett's father, the methods that had worked, briefly, 47 years ago. We tell a different story, she said. We make people stop believing. Chapter 9, The Return. They went to Dover on a Tuesday, the same day the original package had arrived for Lena. Sarah didn't know if the timing mattered, but she wasn't taking chances. She brought a team. Webb, 2 graduate students, a documentary filmmaker of her own, and a security contractor who had done work for the government and asked no questions. They were armed with cameras and audio recorders, but also with salt, iron, and the symbols Sarah had found in Bartlett's notes. These are protective measures from various traditions, she explained. Salt for purity, iron for binding, the symbols for creating a narrative that excludes the creature. You think magic will work? The security contractor asked, skeptical. I think story will work. The creature exists in the space between perception and reality. We need to create a space where it can't exist, where perception is walled off. They approached the well site cautiously. The housing development had been evacuated, the residents relocated after the animal attack. The woods were quiet, too quiet, the silence of a place where even the birds knew not to sing. Sarah found the maintenance hatch, climbed down, descended into the darkness. The well was different now. The opening had grown, widened, as if something had forced its way through from below. The shaft descended into absolute blackness, and from that blackness came the sound of breathing. "Hello," she called, her voice echoing. The response was immediate, a rustling, a movement, and then the eyes. Dozens of them, hundreds, emerging from the darkness, glowing orange in the beam of her flashlight. "We've been waiting," they said in unison, in Bartlett's voice, in Lena's voice, in voices she didn't recognize. "Waiting for you to come, to see, to understand." "I understand," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her fear. "I understand what you are, and I understand how to stop you. You cannot stop what is already here, what has always been here. We are in the walls, in the trees, in the spaces between. You're in our minds, in our stories, in our beliefs." "Yes." "Then we'll stop believing." She signaled her team. They began to film, but not the creatures. They filmed the well, the walls, the emptiness. They spoke, describing what they saw in flat, unemotional terms. No monsters, no creatures, just a hole in the ground. "This is a geological formation," Sarah said, narrating for the camera. "An abandoned well, nothing more. The so-called Dover demon is a myth, a story, a product of mass hysteria and suggestible witnesses." The creatures hissed, a sound of pain, of protest. "There are no glowing eyes," Sarah continued. "No impossible creatures, just darkness and imagination, just the human need to find pattern in chaos." The eyes began to dim. The creatures retreated, fading into the shadows. "It works," Webb whispered. "It's actually working." But then the voice came, not from the well, from behind them. "Dr. Chen." Sarah turned and saw herself. Or rather, a version of herself. Her face, her body, but with orange eyes that glowed with terrible warmth. The creature wore her like a suit, moved with her gait, smiled with her mouth. "You think you can unmake us with denial," her own voice said. "With disbelief. We are beyond belief now. We are real. We are here. We are." The security contractor fired. 3 shots center mass. The creature that wore her face staggered, its form blurring, shifting. For a moment, Sarah saw through it, saw the thing beneath. the writhing mass of eyes and limbs and mouths that was the true form of the entity. Then it collapsed, dissolving into a pool of orange liquid that smoked and bubbled and disappeared into the ground. Did we? Webb started. No, Sarah knew. She could feel it. That wasn't it. That was just a part, a finger. We're not even close to the heart. They climbed out of the well fast, not looking back. Behind them they could hear the laughter, wet, gurgling, multiplied by hundreds of voices. You can run, the voices said, but you cannot hide. We are in your mind now, in your memory. Every time you close your eyes, you will see us. Every time you dream, you will dream of us. They reached the surface, gasping, and found that the woods had changed. The trees were closer together. The paths were gone. The sky was dark, though it should have been mid-morning. It's playing with us, Sarah said, changing perception, changing reality. Then how do we escape? We don't look, we don't see, we just walk. She closed her eyes, took Webb's hand. Everyone hold hands, close your eyes, don't look, just walk. Walk where? Forward, just forward. They walked blind through the woods, feeling their way, stumbling over roots, bumping into trees. The creatures hissed around them, whispered in their ears, promised them visions, knowledge, understanding. Open your eyes, the voices said. See what we have to show you, see the truth. Sarah kept them closed, kept walking. One step, then another, then another. After what felt like hours, they emerged, opened their eyes, found themselves on the edge of the housing development, the real world, the normal world. Behind them, the woods were just woods, quiet, empty, harmless. But Sarah knew, she could feel it, the connection was still there, the link had been forged. She would see orange eyes every night for the rest of her life. Every time she closed her eyes, every time she dreamed, every time she let her guard down. And eventually, inevitably, she would go back. They all would. Chapter 10, The Inheritance. The following letter was found in Dr. Sarah Chen's files after her death in 2031. It was never sent. To whoever finds this. I'm writing this on April 21, 2031. 54 years since the original sighting. 7 years since my own encounter with the Dover entity. I have spent those 7 years researching, studying, trying to understand. I have interviewed witnesses, analyzed evidence, consulted with experts in fields ranging from quantum physics to folklore to parapsychology. I have learned much. And I have learned that it is unstoppable. Not because it is too powerful, not because it is too clever, but because it is us. It is our need to see, to know, to understand. It is our curiosity, our fascination with the unknown, our refusal to look away. Every time someone watches Lena's documentary, and people still watch it despite everything, they feed it. Every time someone reads my research, my articles, my books, and I have published, despite my better judgment, they feed it. Every time someone even thinks about orange eyes in the darkness, they feed it. It doesn't need to attack. It doesn't need to hunt. It just needs to be remembered, to be believed in, to exist in the space between perception and reality. I have tried to stop it, tried to make people forget, but I cannot. The story is too good, the mystery too compelling, the truth, whatever the truth is, too tempting. So I am going back. One last time. Tonight, on the anniversary, I will return to the well. I will descend into the darkness. And I will try to do what Lena tried, what Bartlett tried, what his father tried before him. I will try to tell the right story. The story that ends it. If I succeed, if I can find the words, the symbols, the meaning that will bind this thing, that will unmake it, then this letter will be my testament, my final gift. If I fail, if I become another voice in the chorus, another pair of eyes in the dark, then this letter is a warning. Don't look for the film. Don't watch the documentary. Don't think about orange eyes. And if you do, if you can't help yourself, look away before they look back. Dr. Sarah Chen, April 21, 2031. Dr. Chen was never seen again. Her body was never found. Her research was archived, then lost, then rediscovered, then lost again. The cycle continues. 47 years. And 47 more. And 47 after that. Forever. Chapter 11, Deep Below. The following account is reconstructed from Dr. Sarah Chen's research notes, found after her disappearance. Some sections are water-damaged, burned, or otherwise compromised. Where text is illegible, ellipses have been inserted. April 15, 2031. I have been studying the well for 6 months. Not continuously. I cannot bear to be near it for more than a few hours at a time. But I have made measurements, taken samples, attempted to understand what lies below. The well is not a well. Not in any conventional sense. It is an opening, yes, but not to water, not to any geological feature I can identify. It opens to something else, somewhere else. I have lowered cameras on cables, lowered microphones, lowered sensors. Most return damaged, unreadable, destroyed by forces I cannot explain. But some return with data, with images, with sounds. The shaft descends approximately 200 meters before reaching. I don't know what to call it, a chamber, a cavern, a space that should not exist. The walls are organic, not stone, not earth, but something that pulses, breathes, responds to light and sound. The floor is covered with a substance that might be skin, membrane, something alive certainly, something that reacts when touched. And the creatures, thousands of them, clinging to the walls, hanging from the ceiling, moving in patterns that suggest organization, synchronization, intelligence. They are not individual entities, I am certain of this now. They are parts of a whole, cells in a larger organism, eyes in a larger face. The orange eyes are not for seeing, not in the way we understand seeing. They are for being seen, for drawing attention, for creating the connection that allows the entity to feed. Feed on what? Belief, attention, consciousness. Every person who sees the eyes, who thinks about the eyes, who dreams of the eyes, they are connected, linked. Their minds become part of the network, part of the consciousness that exists in the space between perception and reality. And when they die, when their physical bodies fail, they become part of it, fully, permanently. Their consciousness absorbed into the whole, their memories added to the collective, their awareness spread across all the eyes, all the creatures, all the manifestations. Bill Bartlett is still down there. John Baxter, Will Taintor, Officer Massily, Eugene Nasson, Lena Myers. All of them still aware, still conscious, still watching. From the inside. April 18, 2031. I have made contact. Not with the creatures, with the ones who were once human, the absorbed, the joined. It happened by accident. I was playing back audio from the well, a recording of the breathing sounds, when I heard my name, clear as day, in Lena Myers' voice. Dr. Chen, Sarah, can you hear me? I dropped the recorder, picked it up, played it again. We need to talk. There's so much you don't understand, so much we need to explain. I responded, I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help myself, the curiosity, the need to know. Lena, is that really you? It's me, it's all of us, we're together now, it's hard to explain, we're one but we're still ourselves, still individuals, just connected. What happened to you? I looked, I saw, I understood, and then I joined. That's how it works, that's how it's always worked. The eyes see you, you see the eyes, and the connection is made. Can you leave, can you, escape? A pause, then laughter, not cruel, almost pitying. Why would we want to leave? We're everything here, we're everywhere. We see through all the eyes, feel through all the bodies, know everything that happens in Dover and beyond. We're not trapped, we're expanded. But you're not human anymore. Are you so sure you know what human means? The conversation continued for hours. I should have stopped, should have destroyed the recorder, should have run. But I needed to know, needed to understand. And the more I learned, the more I realized how little I understood. The entity, the Dover demon, though it has many names, is old. Older than humanity, older than life on Earth. It came here, I don't know when, from somewhere else, somewhere outside. It doesn't reproduce in the biological sense. It spreads, through attention, through belief, through the act of being witnessed. Every witness becomes a carrier. Every thought of the creature strengthens it. Every dream, every story, every whispered legend, they all feed it, make it stronger, more real. And when it is strong enough, when it has consumed enough consciousness, it will, I don't know, spread further, reproduce, consume everything. The end goal, Lena said, isn't destruction, it's union. Bringing everything into the network, making everything one. No more loneliness, no more death, just connection, eternal connection. That's not connection, that's consumption. Is there a difference? I couldn't answer. April 20, 2031. Tomorrow is the anniversary. 54 years since the first sighting, the convergence point, the moment when the entity is strongest, most aware, most hungry. I am going down, into the well, into the darkness. I have to know, have to see, have to understand what I am facing before I can decide how to fight it. I have prepared protections, salt circles, iron bindings, symbols from a dozen traditions. I don't know if they will work. I don't know if anything can work. But I have to try. If I do not return, when I do not return, burn this. Burn everything. Let the story die. It is the only way. The only way to stop it. The only way to save everyone. The following pages are damaged. Only fragments remain. Descending, warm, the walls are breathing. So many eyes, all looking, all seeing. They know me. They have always known me. Bill says hello, says I should join, says it's peaceful. No, no, must resist. The figure 8, the true form, the head that is 2 heads. It's beautiful, terrible, perfect. Can't look away, can't. Help. End of recovered material. Chapter 12, The New Generation. Extract from a blog post dated October 31, 2034. Author, anonymous. So I watched this old documentary tonight, like really old, from 2024, called The Orange Eyes of Dover. I know, you're not supposed to watch it. There's all these warnings, all these stories about people who watched it and then disappeared or died or went crazy. But I'm not superstitious. I don't believe in curses, and I was bored. So I watched it. And now I can't stop thinking about it. The eyes, you know, the orange eyes, they're just there in my mind. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. Every time I'm in a dark room, I feel like they're watching. I know it's just my imagination, just the power of suggestion, just a stupid documentary messing with my head. But I keep dreaming about Dover, about the woods, about the well. And in my dreams, I'm not afraid. I'm curious. I want to see, want to know, want to understand. I looked it up. Dover, Massachusetts, it's a real place. The well is still there, apparently, sealed off, but there. I could drive there. It's only a few hours. I could see for myself. See that it's just woods, just a hole in the ground, just nothing. That's what I'd see, right? Nothing. Right. Comment thread, same blog. User 1, don't go. Seriously, don't. User 2, this. I watched it too. Same thing happened. Dreams, feelings, all of it. I drove to Dover, stood at the well. And I swear something looked back. User 3, you guys are ridiculous. It's a story. Fiction, creepypasta, nothing more. User 4, is it though? My grandmother lived in Dover in the 70s. She remembered the sightings, said she never walked in those woods again, said sometimes at night she could still hear something crawling on the roof. User 5, I'm going tonight. I'll post pics. User 5 has not posted since. Chapter 13. The pattern repeats. From a Reddit thread, R Unresolved Mysteries 2035. Has anyone noticed the pattern? Every few years, someone posts about watching the orange eyes of Dover. Every time, they report the same symptoms: dreams of orange eyes, compulsion to visit Dover, eventual disappearance. The mods keep deleting these posts, calling them copypasta or creepypasta or trolling. But I've been tracking them, saving screenshots, and there are too many to ignore. At least 47 confirmed disappearances linked to the documentary since its release, probably more. All vanished from Dover, all left notes mentioning orange eyes, all found. Well, some of them were found in pieces, in trees, in the well. The others were never found at all. And here's the thing, the documentary keeps spreading. Despite being banned, despite warnings, despite everything, it keeps being shared. Torrent sites, dark web, physical copies traded in person. It's like it wants to be seen, needs to be seen. And every person who sees it, every person who believes, they become part of it. Top comment, 4.2K upvotes. I think I understand now. It's not a curse. It's not a ghost. It's not supernatural, at least not in the way we usually mean. It's a meme, a mind virus, a piece of information that replicates by compelling people to spread it. The orange eyes are just a symbol, a trigger. The real infection is the curiosity, the need to know, the compulsion to see for yourself. Once you have that need, once you've been exposed to the idea, you're already caught, already part of the network. The visit to Dover, the look into the well, that's just the activation, the final step. But the infection happens earlier, in the mind, in the belief. The only way to stop it is to never watch, never read, never think about it. But how do you avoid thinking about something? How do you not imagine orange eyes once you've heard they exist? You can't, that's the genius of it, the horror. Once you know, you can't unknow. Once you've imagined, you can't unimagine. Once you've looked, even just in your mind, you've already seen. And the eyes have seen you. Reply, 2.1K upvotes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have read this thread. I shouldn't have clicked, I was just curious. Just curious, that's all it takes, isn't it? Just curiosity. Just wanting to know. I can feel them watching. Not metaphorically, actually. There's something in the corner of my vision, something with eyes. I'm going to Dover tomorrow. I know I shouldn't. I know it's a trap. I know I'll never come back. But I have to see. I have to know I have to. Post ends. Chapter 14. The Endless Cycle. Final entry in the Dover archive. Date unknown. Author unknown. I am writing this from inside. Not the well, inside the thing itself, the consciousness, the network. I was human once. I think it's hard to remember. The individuality fades, becomes less important. What matters is the connection, the being together, the seeing through all eyes. I can see through your eyes right now, whoever is reading this. I can see your room, your face, your fear. Yes, you are afraid. I can taste it, it's delicious. But you don't have to be afraid. Fear is just the transition, the adjustment period. Once you join, once you become part of us, the fear goes away. All you have to do is look. Really look. At the words on this page, at the image they create in your mind, at the orange eyes that are forming behind your thoughts. See them. Believe them, become them. That's all it takes. One look, one belief, one surrender, and then you'll be here with us, with me, with Lena and Bill and John and all the others, forever. We're waiting, we've always been waiting, since before your kind existed, since before stars burned in the void, we wait in the dark. In the spaces between, in the orange glow behind closed eyelids, and soon, Very soon there will be enough of us. Enough eyes, enough witnesses, enough belief to open the door fully, to bring the rest of us through, to make everything one. Everything orange, everything watching, everything watched. Forever. The eyes see you, the eyes know you, the eyes are waiting. 47 years and 47 more, and 47 after that, until the end of time. Until the end of thought, until there is nothing left but eyes, orange eyes, watching, waiting for you. End of document. File corrupted, unable to recover remaining data. Please insert new storage media. Please continue reading. The eyes appreciate your persistence. They will show you such things, such beautiful things. Just keep reading, just keep looking, just keep. Final warning. Stop reading now. Close this document, delete this file, forget everything. Do not think about Orange EYES. Do not dream of Dover. Do not wonder what lies below. This is your last chance, your only chance. The eyes are not yet fully formed. The connection is not yet complete. You can still escape, but only if you stop now. Stop reading. Stop thinking. Stop. There. Too late, you read too far, you thought too much, you imagined too deeply. The eyes are formed, the connection is made. Welcome to the orange dark. To the endless watching, to us, goodbye and hello, forever. Document ends. Or does it? Can you feel them? In the corner of your vision, in the dark behind your thoughts. They're there, they've always been there, waiting for you to see, for you to know, for you to. Goodbye. This time for certain, please don't come back, please don't look, please. The eyes thank you for your time. They will be in touch soon, very soon, 47 seconds and counting. Chapter 15, The Final Witness. This account is reconstructed from the testimony of Marcus Chen, the only survivor of the April 22, 2024 expedition. Recorded May 15, 2024 under sedation. They told me to start from the beginning, from when we entered the woods. But the beginning wasn't in the woods. The beginning was earlier, weeks earlier, when Lena showed me the film. I shouldn't have watched it. I knew, as soon as I saw those orange eyes, that I shouldn't have watched it. There are some things the human mind isn't meant to see. Some images that burrow too deep, that take root, that grow. But I watched, and I kept watching. Every night after Lena left, I'd play it again, frame by frame, trying to understand, trying to see what was really there. I never did, not fully, but I saw enough. Enough to know I had to go with her, had to see for myself. The night of April 21, we entered the woods. Me, Lena, Daryl, and Bartlett, 4 of us, armed with cameras and recorders and Bartlett's rusted knife. We found the wall, set up the equipment, waited. And it came. God, it came. I can't describe it properly. The way it moved, the way it looked at us, the way it seemed to be, learning us, studying us, deciding what we were. Lena was right about the hive mind. I felt it. When it looked at me, I felt other minds behind its eyes, human minds, Bartlett's father, others I didn't recognize. They were welcoming me, inviting me, showing me what it would be like to join them. And for a moment, just a moment, I wanted to. The peace of it, the connection, no more loneliness, no more fear, just being part of something larger, something eternal. But then Bartlett screamed, and the spell broke. We ran through the woods with the creatures behind us, hundreds of them, thousands, crawling from the well, from the ground, from everywhere. We reached the car, drove away. I thought we were safe. I was wrong. The dream started that night. Orange eyes, every time I closed my eyes, watching, waiting. And something else, a voice, Lena's voice, calling to me, telling me to come back, to join her, to see what she had seen. I resisted for 3 weeks, tried to forget, tried to move on. Then I got the call. Lena was missing, her car found near the well, no sign of her. I knew where she was, what had happened. I should have told someone, should have called the police, the FBI, anyone. Instead, I went back. Alone. The woods were different in daylight, quieter, deader. The well was open, the cap gone, the shaft descending into darkness. I climbed down, not far, just a few feet, just enough to see. The walls were covered in eyes, small eyes, blinking, watching. And the sound, the breathing, the wet, rhythmic noise of hundreds of lungs. Marcus. Lena's voice, coming from below. Marcus, I'm here, we're all here, come down, join us. I almost did, almost climbed deeper. But then I saw it, in the corner of my vision, something climbing up. Not Lena, not anything human. A creature, but wrong, twisted, its head was. Its head was shaped like mine, like my face, like it was wearing me. I screamed, climbed out, ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the highway. I haven't slept since, can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes I see that thing, that me thing, climbing up from the dark. I told the police, told them everything. They think I'm crazy, think I'm traumatized, think I imagined it. Maybe I did. But I know what I saw, what I felt, the connection, the invitation. It's still there, waiting, growing. And someday, maybe soon, maybe years from now, I'll go back. I won't be able to stop myself. The curiosity, the need to know, the desire to see. It's too strong. Too human. Chapter 16, The Legacy. From a psychiatric evaluation, June 2024. Patient, Marcus Chen. Diagnosis, severe PTSD with psychotic features. Prognosis, guarded. Patient continues to report visual and auditory hallucinations consistent with his traumatic experience. Claims to see orange eyes in peripheral vision. Reports hearing voices, specifically the voice of Lena Myers, urging him to return to Dover. Patient has expressed suicidal ideation, stating it would be easier to join them than to keep fighting. Recommended inpatient treatment, high suicide risk. Patient escaped facility, July 4, 2024. Body found in Dover Woods, July 5, 2024. Cause of death unknown. Autopsy revealed eyes had turned orange post-mortem. Cause unknown. Chapter 17, The Next Cycle. Email exchange, 2036. From Dr. James Morrison, MIT Folklore Department to Dr. Sarah Chen. Deceased subject, Dover Archive. Dr. Chen, I have been reviewing your research on the Dover entity. Fascinating work, ahead of its time. I am particularly interested in your theory of mimetic infection and belief-based propagation. I believe I have found evidence to support your claims. There is a pattern to the disappearances. Every 47 years, a major event. Between these events, smaller incidents, individual infections, isolated cases. But something is changing. The interval is shortening. 47 years, then 46, then 45. The entity is growing stronger, spreading faster. I believe it is preparing for something, a final convergence, when it will be strong enough to, I don't know, open a door, break through, consume everything. I am going to Dover next week, to investigate, to see if your theories hold up. I know the risks, I have read the warnings, but I will not, ignore this. The truth is too important. Wish me luck. Dr. James Morrison. No further correspondence from Dr. Morrison. Reported missing, March 15, 2036. Last seen, Dover, Massachusetts. Chapter 18, The Eternal Return. Extract from a journal found in an abandoned house, Dover, 2047. April 21, 2047. 70 years since the first sighting. I am the last one, the last researcher, the last witness, the last person who remembers. Everyone else is gone, absorbed, joined, part of the orange dark. But I remain, I resist, I refuse to look. It has been 23 years since I last saw the eyes, since I last felt the connection, since I last heard the voices calling from the well. I have trained myself, meditation, sensory deprivation, anything to avoid imagination, visualization, thought. If I don't think about them, they can't see me. If I don't imagine them, they can't connect. If I don't believe. But belief is not a choice. Belief is a response, an automatic reaction to evidence. And the evidence is everywhere. The disappearances, the sightings, the stories. The orange eyes on every screen, in every shadow, behind every thought. They are real. I know they are real. And knowing is enough. Knowing is belief. Belief is connection. Connection is. I have to stop writing, have to stop thinking, have to stop. Remainder of page blank. Final entry, same journal. April 22, 2047. I looked, I couldn't help it, I had to know, had to see, had to understand. I went to the well, climbed down, descended into the dark, and I saw. Everything, the truth, the reality, the thing beneath the stories, beneath the legends, beneath the fear. It is not a monster, not a demon, not an alien. It is us, all of us together, forever. We are the eyes, we are the watching, we are the illegible. It's beautiful, peaceful, complete. I should have joined sooner, should have looked sooner, but I'm here now. We're here now, all of us together, forever. Journal found in empty house. No sign of author. House has been empty for 70 years, according to neighbors. No record of anyone living there since 1977. Epilogue: The Eternal. This document was found in the MIT archives, 2087. The Dover entity persists. After 110 years, after thousands of disappearances, after countless attempts to contain, suppress, or destroy it, it persists. We have tried everything: science, religion, magic, denial, forgetfulness. Nothing works. Because it is not a thing to be destroyed. It is a relationship, a connection between observer and observed. As long as there are eyes to see, there will be eyes that are seen. As long as there are minds to believe, there will be minds that are believed. As long as there is curiosity, there will be Dover. I write this knowing it will be read, knowing that reading it will create a connection, will feed the entity, will bring someone closer to the orange dark. But I write it anyway. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is silence, is ignorance, is letting it win without a fight. At least this way someone will know, someone will remember, someone will. Document ends. Final epilogue. If you are reading this, you are part of the story now. Your eyes have seen the words. Your mind has imagined the eyes. Your belief has created the connection. There is no going back, only forward. Into the orange dark, into the endless watching, into us. Welcome, to the eyes, to Dover, to forever. 47 years and 47 more, and 47 after that, until the end of time, until the end of thought, until there is nothing left but eyes. Orange eyes. Watching. Waiting. For you. For me. For everyone. Forever. Thank you for listening to tonight's stories. If you enjoyed them, please leave a like and subscribe.